Chapter 754. Ready. With a roar, Wang Chong finally released the halo of Dusk Stallion in his body. There was a metallic clattering as a black halo with sharp edges and a dark red tint emerged from Wang Chong's feet and spread to all the Wushang cavalry. Bolstered by the halo of Dusk Stallion, the already powerful Wushang cavalry instantly swelled in strength, speed, and dexterity. But it was far from over. In the blink of an eye, a second halo of Dusk Stallion descended from Wang Chong's body and spread to the entire army, and then a third. After returning from the southwest, Wang Chong's halo of Dusk Stallion had also expanded, going from the true martial realm to the imperial martial realm, and the one halo had also increased to 3. The 3 halos of Dusk Stallion boosted the strength of all the Wushang cavalry to an inconceivable level. Most frightening of all was that under the effects of the halo of Dusk Stallion, the 5,000 top-quality Turkic warhorses seemed to break through some sort of barrier. They seemed to be flying, leaving behind afterimages in the air. If the speed of an ordinary warhorse was taken as an example, then the Wushang cavalry had already reached twice the speed of an ordinary warhorse. Ah! As if sensing the change in the Wushang cavalry, the Uzun army began to cry out in alarm. What's going on? They're so fast. Just how did these Tang people do it? How can they have such fast horses? The highland steeds of the Uzun had grown up on the plateau and had sturdy bodies, incredible endurance, and terrifying charging speeds. This was also the reason why the Uzun could challenge the Tang dynasty and even intimidate the kingdoms of the western regions. To the Uzun, the highland steed was one of the best warhorses in the world. But the Tang people clearly did not raise warhorses, nor did they have any pastures, yet their warhorses were much faster. Get ready. Just when Uzun's troops were in a slight state of chaos, a dignified, calm, and sonorous voice resounded through the sky. At this time, the only person who could maintain his calm was the general in charge of Zhangzhung recruit training camp, Dian Pugil. His expression was calm, and there was not the slightest fluctuation on his steel-like face. From the beginning to the end, his gaze was locked onto Wang Chong. As the general in charge of Zhangzhung recruit training camp, Dian Pugil had a thorough understanding of the military system of the surrounding kingdoms, including that of the Tang dynasty. The young man riding on a Turkic warhorse in the center was clearly the commander of the entire Tang people's army. In Dian Pugil's memories, there had never been such a young cavalry general in the Longxi region. But in Dian Pugil's memories, there was someone else who could match this young man. But at this moment, it didn't matter who the other party was. Echelon formation, charge. Dian Pugil rode his red warhorse in the middle of the army. With a wave of his sword, the 27,000-some Tibetan cavalry began to transform. There was no obvious change in the speed of the vast army, but they quickly separated into layers, and quickly gathered towards the center. In the blink of an eye, all the cavalry in the training camp had used the Uzun's famed echelon formation. 800 zhang, 700 zhang, 600 zhang. As they got closer and closer, the killing intent grew thicker and thicker. On the flat plateau, both the Uzun and the Wushang cavalry could see the armor worn by their foes, and they could even see the breaths exhaled by their foes. 500 zhang, 400 zhang, 300 zhang, the atmosphere grew tenser and tenser, and everyone's blood seemed to freeze as they stared at their foes. 200 zhang, 100 zhang, 50 zhang. Kill! All the soldiers, whether they were Uzun or Wushang cavalry, raised their sabers and swords and let out heaven-shaking roars. At this moment, the tension in the air had reached its peak. To the Uzun and Wushang cavalry, 50 zhang was just a few seconds away. The distance continued to shrink. 300 zhang, 200 zhang, 100 zhang, boom. With an earth-shattering boom, the 5,000 Wushang Tang people cavalry and the 27,000 Uzun echelon formation collided like two massive beasts. In an instant, the cries of warhorses, the clashing of sabers and swords, and the screams of soldiers from both sides mixed into one. Unexpectedly, the fierce and courageous Uzun army only lasted for a few moments before the 5,000 Wushang cavalry instantly pierced through the first echelon formation. All the Uzun cavalry standing in the way of the army fell, their riders cleaved in two, their flesh and blood flying. On this plateau far from the central plains, Wang Chang's 5,000 Wushang cavalry displayed their overwhelming strength for the first time. Many Uzun cavalry didn't even get close before they were cleaved in two by the peerlessly sharp halo of Dusk Stallion, all of them dead. Don't panic. Hold your ground. Charge from the sides. The panicked shouts of the Uzun officers resounded over the battlefield, but before they could adjust their tactics, the 5,000 Wushang cavalry had already pierced through the second echelon formation, and then the third, the fourth, in front of Wang Chang's Wushang cavalry. The attacks and defenses of the Uzun soldiers were like pieces of paper. All the Uzun cavalry couldn't even stop Wang Chang's army for a moment. The Ney was in complete disarray, and in a few short moments, the Uzun had suffered astonishing losses. 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, how could this be? How could they have such a powerful fighting force? At this moment, even Dian Pugil paled. The Uzun were renowned throughout the world for their fighting prowess, and there had never been an army like the Tang people's cavalry, which possessed such terrifying strength. The echelon formation came in wave after wave. In the past, even when facing opponents stronger than the Wushang soldiers, the echelon formation was able to block their charge until their speed dropped to zero. In this kind of wilderness, without speed, cavalry would only be a dead end. But even after piercing 10-some echelon formations, the Tang dynasty cavalry showed no signs of slowing down. Bang! 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 Ah! If one looked down from the sky, one could see that the 27,000 Uzun soldiers had been completely pierced through by Wang Chang's cavalry. Cutting formation. The moment the 5,000 Wushang cavalry pierced through the Uzun army, Wang Chong raised his sword and issued another order. Boom! The 5,000 soldiers made a sharp turn at an extremely high speed, but their speed didn't change in the slightest. Gallop! With the galloping of hooves, the 5,000 cavalry suddenly adopted a completely different strategy. In the blink of an eye, the army suddenly broke up into smaller groups that intersected with each other like nooses, slashing at the Tibetan army on either side of them. The three halos of Dusk Stallion boosted the 5,000 Wushang cavalry to an astonishing speed. In just a few seconds, Wang Chang's 5,000 cavalry had once more caught up to the Uzun army. These Uzun soldiers had originally been charging at Wang Chang's forces, but now, due to the inertia of their high-speed charge, they were being chased by Wang Chong and attacked from the rear, instantly throwing the army into chaos. Rumble! Countless warhorses howled as they toppled to the ground. Wang Chang's group was much faster than them. Ah! Careful, they're coming from the rear. Run, run! Just what sort of army is this? How could there be cavalry this fast? All the Uzun soldiers were stunned by the Tang people's army. In their minds, cavalry, no matter how fast, had a limit, but this Tang people's army had completely shattered their understanding. No army had ever been like them, charging at high speed, piercing through the enemy's formation and then turning around to catch up. It was like they were completely unaffected by the inertia of the high-speed charge. This completely overturned their understanding of cavalry. Run! This was the only thought in the minds of the Uzun cavalry. Rumble! Rumble! The rear of the Uzun army was in chaos, but this was just the beginning. Sharp blades cut through flesh and blood. Wang Chang's 5,000 cavalry were divided into 100 squads, and like 100 nooses, they crisscrossed and charged at high speed. Even plate armor could not withstand such great power. Although the outside was undamaged, the internal organs inside were already shattered. The power of cavalry, the power of the warhorse's high-speed charge, and the power of the halos, when these three powers were combined, it was not something ordinary people could imagine. In this aspect, the Wushang cavalry was completely overwhelming. 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. Under the charge of Wang Chang's 5,000 cavalry, the Uzun army was completely routed. Not even 5 minutes had passed since the start of the battle, but more than 8,000 of the 27,000 Uzun soldiers had already been killed, and this number was still rapidly growing. At this moment, all the Uzun soldiers had fear in their eyes. The number of casualties was simply too astonishing. The strength of the Tang people's army had completely surpassed their imaginations. Bastard! 100 Some Zhang from the Uzun formation, Dian Pujiel was trembling, his eyes red. In the first clash, he had believed that he could use his enormous numbers and the charge of the echelon formation to block the enemy and then flank the 5,000 Tang people. Chapter 755. Summon the Qinghai soldiers. Finish them off in one round. Dian Pujiel's eyes blazed with fury. The deaths of more than 8,000 Uzun recruits had ignited his rage. No soldier of any other race could act so impudently on the Uzun plateau, especially the Tang people, who were primarily infantry. No matter who these people were, if they thought that by defeating these recruits, they could strut around and do as they pleased on the plateau, then they were gravely mistaken. He would definitely let them know what it meant to be the true ruler of the plateau. Rumble. Following Dian Pujiel's order, the remaining 20,000 Uzun cavalry instantly began to transform. All the recruits seemed to have encountered something and quickly parted to the sides. Behind them, smoke and dust billowed as a powerful aura rushed forward like a storm. In the blink of an eye, an army of more than 7,000 soldiers, muscular, was galloping forward. Unlike the other Uzun cavalry, the majority of the cavalry in the recruit training camp wore armor that was either incomplete or only partially complete. Only a portion of the soldiers would wear the full set of armor of the regular army. But this army was covered in thick and heavy red armor, and in terms of quality, it was even better than that of the regular army. This was a treatment that no other soldier enjoyed. But the most unique feature was their foreheads. In the center of their foreheads, near the center of their eyebrows, was a white mark about the size of a thumb. The 7,000 red-armored soldiers, seething with killing intent, galloped toward Dian Pujiel. Qinghai. On the chests of these red-armored soldiers were the words Qinghai written in Uzun. Qinghai soldiers. These were the strongest force in Zhangzheng recruit training camp, the soldiers that Dian Mengpoj had written to covet. The Blue Sea soldiers were different from the White Braves, and they were also different from the other Uzun soldiers. They were not carefully selected from the 4 royal lineages of the Uzun, but from the Blue Sea, where the Uzun was located at an extremely high altitude and had a unique terrain. Qinghai had always been one of the most elite sources of cavalry for the Uzun Empire. The soldiers there were strong and talented, and the martial arts they practiced were completely different from the other Uzun soldiers. They were much faster and had higher achievements. These Qinghai soldiers had always been the source of all of Uzun's elite cavalry and generals' personal guards. On the other hand, the Qinghai soldiers were even more special. They were carefully selected from all the Qinghai soldiers. There were very few Qinghai soldiers to begin with. 7,000 Qinghai soldiers was already the limit. This time, Dian Pujiel had relied on his decades of experience in training recruits to stand out and be chosen by the Tsenpo to be the commanding general of the 7,000 Qinghai soldiers. Dian Pujiel cherished them and gave them special treatment. Although their training had not yet been completed, all their armor was in place, and nothing was missing. Soldiers were trained for 1,000 days to be used in a single moment, and now was the time for these 7,000 Qinghai soldiers to be used. Everyone, hear my order. Follow me to kill the Tang people. Rumble. With this order, Dian Pujiel was the first to leap forward and charge at Wang Chang's group. Meanwhile, on the other side, Wang Chang's forces were sweeping through the Uzun forces, crushing them. The Uzun soldiers were constantly gathering and attempting to counterattack Wang Chang's forces, but all their resistance was futile. In the face of Wang Chang's cutting formation, the Uzun soldiers didn't even have a chance to regroup before they were scattered. Wushang village had always been known as the strongest source of soldiers for the Tang dynasty, and all the Wushang villagers were far stronger than ordinary soldiers. Moreover, The majority of the Wushang villagers were close to the profound martial realm, and with the boost from the Wushang halo and the halo of Dusk Stallion, the Wushang cavalry had completely surpassed the Uzun cavalry. Not even the regular Uzun soldiers could stop them, let alone these new recruits who were still in training. Rumble. One group of Uzun cavalry after another fell. Buzz. As Wang Chang's Wushang cavalry were slaughtering their way through, a strange feeling suddenly welled up in his heart. Wang Chong sensed something and raised his head. To his left, he saw a Uzun general riding a red warhorse amid a roiling cloud of dust. Behind him were tens of thousands of horses, tens of thousands of Uzun cavalry dressed in dark red armor. They seemed to cover the heavens and the earth, as if they could topple mountains and overturn seas. Together with the vast sea of Uzun cavalry, they roared and charged in his direction. Amongst the black-armored Uzun soldiers, these dark red-armored Uzun soldiers stood out from the rest and were extremely eye-catching. Qinghai soldiers. As Wang Chang's gaze drifted over the white insignia on the foreheads of these dark red soldiers, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Unlike the white braves, Wang Chong had seen the Qinghai soldiers before. Their range of activity was not limited to Qixi, but also Longxi. Although he had only caught a glimpse of them, they had left a deep impression on Wang Chong. Although the Qinghai soldiers before him had not reached that level of power when compared to the Qinghai soldiers that had been tempered and baptized in the fires of war, they had already begun to take shape. The Uzun had 3 top-class armies, each of them capable of enormous destruction. On the battlefield, they were completely capable of influencing the course of a battle and the outcome of victory or defeat. The Qinghai soldiers' range of activity was too large, and towards the end of the Tang dynasty, this army had wreaked havoc on the Tang dynasty. Now that everything had begun anew, the world-renowned Wushang cavalry had reappeared, but the Qinghai soldiers were far from reaching the heights of the later generations. Now that he had this chance, Wang Chong would not allow the Qinghai soldiers to wreak havoc in the world and wreak havoc on the Tang dynasty. 10,000 streams returned to the origin. Without the slightest hesitation, the moment he saw the Qinghai soldiers, Wang Chong gave the order, and the Wushang cavalry, which had been divided into 50 groups of 100 men each and had been madly attacking the Tibetans, suddenly began to converge. In less than a second, the 5,000 Wushang cavalry had finished reassembling their formation. Kill! Charge! The warhorses thundered. This time, the two sides collided much faster than expected. With an earth-shattering bang, the two world-renowned cavalry units crashed into each other like two prehistoric beasts. Boom! As the two cavalry clashed, no one noticed that a massive white halo of thorns, completely different from any other halo, had suddenly erupted from under Wang Chang's feet, sweeping across the battlefield like a hurricane. But unlike before, this milky white halo of thorns did not attach itself to his own soldiers, but to the Uzun soldiers. Bzzz. In a flash of light, milky white halos of light appeared beneath the feet of the Uzun cavalry. The thousands of Uzun cavalry were instantly covered in these milky white halos. Under the effect of these milky white halos, all the Uzun soldiers, including the 7,000 Qinghai soldiers, were rapidly weakened by several levels. Not good. Dian Pujiel was flabbergasted by this sight, and even the resolute Qinghai soldier paled, instantly losing his calm and composure. A single stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. Ni. The 7,000 Qinghai soldiers immediately fell into disarray. Some of the Qinghai soldiers sensed the changes in their bodies and slowed down. However, the cavalry behind them continued to move at an extremely high speed, one slowing down while the other speeding up. A series of fierce neighs rang out as hundreds of Qinghai soldiers crashed into one another. Due to the inertia, they screamed and fell off their warhorses, falling under the hooves of the charging warhorses, and were trampled over by tens of thousands of charging warhorses. But this was only the beginning. With a heaven-shaking roar, the Wushang cavalry once more assumed formation. Immovable as a mountain, they charged like a bolt of lightning into the ranks of the Qinghai soldiers. Broom! Without any finesse or concession, a Wushang cavalry clashed with a Qinghai soldier in Ney. The sound of flesh against flesh was even louder than that of a collapsing mountain. Pang! The crimson-armored Green Sea soldier was flung into the air. If the original Qinghai soldiers had been able to fight against Wang Chang's Wushang cavalry, the effects of the bane of the battlefield had caused their strength to drop by several levels. They were no longer able to contend against the Wushang cavalry. Thud thud thud. Countless Wushang cavalry charged, and the sounds of collisions, the neighing of horses, and the wretched howls of their horses mixed together into a cacophony of sounds. In this confrontation, the future world-famous Qinghai army was instantly torn apart. One after another, the tall and sturdy highland steeds fell to the ground, screaming in pain. The 7,000 Qinghai army was utterly defeated, and the scene was a mess. Bastard! At this moment, no one was more shocked and furious than Dian Pujiel. The Qinghai soldiers were the strongest force in Zhangsheng recruit training camp, including all of Tsangka. They were also the strongest force of the future Uzun. They were far stronger than anyone else. He had never imagined that not even the Qinghai soldiers would be able to stop them. When had an ordinary army of the Tang dynasty become so powerful? Just who are you people? With a furious roar, Dian Shibua became one with his horse and raised his saber, instantly slashing at the Wushang cavalry's sharpest point. Rumble. A dazzling and transparent wave of energy exploded from Dian Pujiel's body. The violent shockwave spread out rapidly, covering an area of several thousand feet. Neigh! Ah! The neighing of horses and the wretched screams filled the air. The grass within 100 zhang was blown up as the Wushang cavalry were thrown 10 some zhang into the air like ragdolls before crashing to the ground. Buzz! Chapter 756. This person's existence had instantly altered the course of the battle. Wang Chang's Wushang cavalry had been unstoppable, but the obstruction of this Uzun general had caused them to suffer a slight setback. Not only that, under the leadership of this Uzun general, the morale of the other Uzun cavalry soared, and they began to gather behind him, forming a new front line. Humph, Dian Pujiel. Wang Chang's eyes chilled as he glanced at that red highland steed and instantly recognized it. The Uzun general with the highest status in Zhangsheng recruit training camp was, without a doubt, the Dian Pujiel of the Dian clan. Just like Dian Mangpoj, he was also a member of the illustrious Dian clan of the Uzun Empire. If Dian Mangpoj could be said to be the Azura of the Uzun Empire, a rabid dog, a venomous snake, and a sharp weapon used to constantly attack the surrounding kingdoms, then Dian Pujiel was the source of vitality of the Uzun Empire. Overseeing Zhangsheng, Dian Pujiel had trained countless soldiers for the Uzun Empire over the past few decades. Batch after batch of herdsmen, ordinary Uzun people, and tribal warriors would be trained by Dian Pujiel into the famed and brave warriors of the Uzun cavalry whose mere mention caused the surrounding kingdoms to pale. It was precisely because of Dian Pujiel's existence that a madman like Dian Mangpoj could engage in a frenzied campaign without any worries. Dian Pujiel had been involved in the training camp for a very long time. Based on what Wang Chong knew, this commanding general of Zhangsheng had already become Tsangka's overseer even before the Tang dynasty's war god Wang Zhongxi had overseen Longxi, and Geshu Han had yet to make a name for himself. Many of the Longxi soldiers that Wang Zhongxi had fought in the past were trained by him. In Uzun, the two cousins, Dian Pujiel and Dian Mangpoj, were known as the two Dian heroes. Although he didn't often go to the front lines to participate in battle, Dian Pujiel was no less of a threat than Dian Mangpoj. From a certain perspective, he was even more of a threat than Dian Mangpoj. Since we've run into each other, then maybe, we can only kill them. Wang Chang's pupils constricted, and his eyes instantly emitted an extremely strong killing intent. Dian Pujiel was extremely powerful, and although his attack just now wasn't as powerful as Dian Mangpoj's, he was at least at the Saint Martial realm, even higher than Wang Chang's. If it were any other time, Wang Chong might not be his match. However, now that he had the 5,000 strongest Wushang iron cavalry, everything was different. Cutting formation. With Wang Chang's order, all the Wushang iron cavalry scattered like a goddess scattering flowers. As they scattered, they split into groups of 2, forming 50 groups of around 100 each. Each group was like a chain that pierced into the Uzun army. The speed of the transformation, the strength of the soldiers, and the tacit cooperation made even Dian Pugil's eyes widen. He had been training soldiers on the plateau for 10 some years now, and he had trained soldiers of all levels. But not even the strongest soldiers he had trained could be as well trained as this youth of the Tang dynasty, so well coordinated, so disciplined. This level of soldiers was not something that could be trained by ordinary soldiers or commanders. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he would have found it very difficult to imagine that someone could train soldiers on a higher level than him, and that it was a group of Tang people who were not skilled in cavalry. But a moment later, Dian Pugil came back to his senses. "Kill for me." Dian Pugil's eyes were frigid as he waved his saber and pointed it at Wang Chong. He could already tell that this youth of 16 or 17 was the commander of this strange Tang dynasty cavalry. As long as he could kill him, these Tang people would naturally collapse without a fight, their crisis resolved. Nay. His warhorse neighed as Dian Shibua became one with his horse, leaping into the air like a heavenly dragon and charging at Wang Chong. Humph. On the other side, Wang Chong's eyes chilled and he sneered. Whoosh. Slapping his horse, he turned around and charged like a bolt of lightning toward Dian Pugil. Kill. Kill. With a roar, Wang Chong pointed his sword at Dian Pugil as he gave the final order to charge. Boom. Nay. The speed of the two generals was so fast that this distance was nothing to them at all. With an earth-shattering boom, the two figures in the air merged into one and soared into the sky, violently colliding with each other in the void. Clang. At the moment of impact, Wang Chong's body flashed with a dazzling radiance that surged out from Wang Chong's feet and attached itself to Dian Pugil's. In the blink of an eye, Dian Pugil's strength had dropped. Even someone as determined, calm, and ambitious as Dian Pugil couldn't help but grimace at this moment. The martial general halo. In this clash, Wang Chong had immediately unleashed the powerful halo he had obtained from the Stone of Destiny. Rumble. The heavens swayed and the earth quaked. A dazzling light, like a sun descending to the mortal world, erupted from the point where Wang Chong and Dian Pugil had clashed, rapidly expanding in every direction. Whoosh! Fierce stellar energy stirred up gales in the area, and all the warhorses in this area, whether they were Uzun soldiers, Wushang cavalry, or Qinghai soldiers, were sent flying. Run! Danger! In the face of a clash between two commanders, as well as two supreme experts, everyone fled in fear. Dian Pugil was an expert at Tier 3 or 4 of the Saint Martial realm who had been overseeing Tsangka for many years, but this was the first time they had seen him fight. As for that youth of the Tang dynasty, although no one knew where he came from, anyone who could directly contend against Lord Dian Pugil could easily imagine his strength. However, in the blink of an eye, just as everyone was about to dodge, they suddenly heard a long and excited hiss in their ears. Nay! Whoosh! A crimson figure soared into the air like a rainbow, and before anyone else could react, he swung his saber at Dian Pugil to congratulate him on the new year. Rumble! Even Dian Pugil paled in the face of Li Sai's all-out attack. Li Sai had always been very strong, and he was also borrowing the power of his Fergana horse's charge. Now that Dian Pugil was facing a pincer attack from both Wang Chong and Li Sai, he found it difficult to defend himself. Bzzz. In the blink of an eye, the stellar energy barrier around Dian Pugil's body dimmed. But it was far from over. The neighing of horses came from all around Nei, and from a distance, one could see that the 5,000 Wushang cavalry that had charged into the Uzun army had suddenly retreated. The 5,000 Wushang cavalry, divided into 50 groups, shot toward Dian Pugil like bolts of lightning. By the time Dian Pugil, Wang Chong, and Li Sai had fallen to the ground, all the Wushang cavalry had already begun to charge. Boom! 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 One by one, the Wushang cavalry charged toward Dian Pugil like bolts of lightning. At this moment, even Dian Pugil's eyes revealed a deep fear. He wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Wang Chong had scattered the 5,000 Wushang cavalry precisely to deal with him. Boom boom boom. The tens of thousands of warhorses howled and slammed into Dian Pugil's body. Aya! With a scream, Dian Pugil's stellar energy rapidly dimmed like a candle in the wind. In the blink of an eye, he had fallen from Tier 3 to Tier 2 of the Saint Martial Realm, to Tier 8 to Tier 9 of the Imperial Martial Realm, and then Tier 6 to Tier 7 of the Imperial Martial Realm. Boom! A woozy steel sword that was even taller than a grown man exploded forward, piercing through Dian Pugil's body. During this entire process, Wang Chong had been using his great yin-yang heaven creation art to keep Dian Pugil at bay. Boom! With a massive boom, Dian Pugil's eyes went wide, his arms spread wide, and his body slowly collapsed to the ground. More than half of the stellar energy in his body had flowed into Wang Chong's body. With a massive thud, Dian Pugil's body crashed to the ground, sending up a cloud of dust as he remained motionless. In the face of the charge of tens of thousands of Black Tortoise Realm cavalry, with top-class generals like Wang Chong and Li Sai holding them back, even a top-class general like Dian Pugil, a Saint Martial expert, could not hold on and died. Let's go. Wang Chong called out to Li Sai. Glancing at Dian Pugil's corpse on the ground, he mounted Dian Pugil's red Highland steed. Wang Chong's excellent Turkic warhorse had been killed in the clash just now, pulverized by the stellar energy of the pair. Although these excellent warhorses of the Turkic steppe had sturdy bodies comparable to the best Arabian horses, they were still no match for Dian Pugil's divine steed from the Great Snow Mountain Temple. In a clash between top-class experts, the problem of their bodies not being sturdy enough was immediately apparent. Arrow formation, charge. Wang Chong waved his sword and gave the order to charge once more. An ordinary cavalry army would have fallen into chaos after the battle just now and would not have been able to regroup so quickly. But just a few seconds after Wang Chong's order, Wang Chong's 5,000 Wushang cavalry shifted into a new arrow formation. Boom! With a single charge, the newly regrouped Uzun cavalry were scattered. Ah! Ah! Waves of blood-curdling screams, the sounds of horses crashing into each other, neighing, and the clashing of swords and sabers rang out incessantly. Even with Dian Pugil present, the Uzun army had not been able to stop the charge of Wang Chong's Wushang cavalry, and now that Dian Pugil had been killed, the remaining Uzun cavalry were even less of a match. Chapter 757. Buzz. Wang Chong slowly glanced at the scattered Uzun soldiers, then quickly looked away and closed his eyes to cultivate. The blood energy in his body was seething, and he had absorbed at least half of Dian Pugil's stellar energy. He would need at least 15 minutes to completely digest and absorb this Saint Martial stellar energy for his own use. The strength of the Saint Martial realm truly is formidable. To be able to kill a Saint Martial expert like Dian Pugil in this raid on Uzun was not in vain. Wang Chong's eyes were closed, but his mind was in turmoil. Dian Pugil had still been too careless. He had been confident in his superior martial arts, but he had no idea what he was up against. In the era of the Great Calamity where all kinds of martial arts were highly integrated, there were far too many ways to deal with those powerful commanders on the battlefield. The cutting formation was one of them. Using the strength of the 5,000 Wushang cavalry to exhaust Dian Pugil's stellar energy to the bare minimum and then kill him in a single blow was a classic example of the cutting formation. If it were Wang Chong's future opponents, they would naturally know how to use the strength of their army to block the cutting formation, but Dian Pugil had no such idea. He had not even noticed the other Wushang cavalry, so it was no surprise that he had ended up dead. Ah! Don't kill me. I'm willing to surrender. Panicked and terrified shouts in Uzun could be heard, but no one besides Wang Chong knew what these Uzun cavalry were saying. Screams filled the air, and the stench of blood was getting thicker and thicker. Wang Chong sat motionlessly on his horse, his eyes closed as he pushed the halo of Dusk Stallion to its limits. Wang Chong was unperturbed by those screams. These Uzun recruits from Zhangzheng would all become the fiercest, and most terrifying highland warriors on this plateau in the future. They would become the nightmares of all the neighboring countries, including the Tang dynasty. If he showed mercy now, there would be thousands of people of the Tang dynasty who would become the souls of the dead under their iron hooves in the future. Therefore, Wang Chong would not show any mercy. The hoofbeats of the warhorses, the shouts of the warriors, the sounds of pursuit, and the whistling of the wild grass in the wild wind lingered in his ears. Wang Chong stood there motionlessly. After an unknown amount of time, the sounds of fighting in his ears gradually weakened, and slowly became inaudible. Report. Hurried sounds of horse hooves could be heard approaching him. A knight jumped down from his horse and quickly knelt before Wang Chong. Marquis, the battle has ended. All of the Uzun soldiers have been annihilated. Only a few have escaped in all directions. Lord Su has led his men to pursue them. Do you need more men? No need. Wang Chong waved his hand and opened his eyes. Sound the gongs to retreat. Tell General Li and the others to gather the army and prepare to leave. Dian Pugil was dead, and the objective had been achieved. The remaining Uzun warriors who had fled were the best helpers in this battle. This was not the first time the Tang dynasty had climbed the Uzun plateau, and it would not be the last. Dian Pugil and the 20,000 some new recruits of Zhangzheng training camp were the best warning to the Uzun Empire. Henceforth, they would understand that any invasion or attack against the Tang dynasty would be overestimating their own strength and would incur the furious retaliation of the Tang dynasty. Yes. Receiving the order, the cavalrymen quickly mounted their warhorses and flew away. Boom! A few moments later, with the blaring of horns, the 5,000 Wushang cavalry began to converge. Behind them, one could see mountains of corpses and rivers of blood. The corpses of Uzun soldiers and highland steeds were strewn about, scimitars littered the ground, and between the corpses were broken black war banners. Even farther away, thick smoke roiled and flames blazed. That was the burning remains of Zhangzheng training camp. In a single night, this enormous and prestigious training camp for top-class recruits of the Uzun Empire had been reduced to nothing. Hiya! After taking one last look into the distance, Wang Chong waved his hand and led his soldiers away from the Uzun plateau, returning to Longxi via the original path. Other than the corpses littering the ground and the thick stench of blood in the air, no one knew what had happened just now. Around 6 hours after Wang Chong's group left, the earth began to tremble and the hooves of warhorses stomped against the ground. Black silhouettes appeared in the distance, howling as they approached. Ah! Upon seeing the ruins of Zhangzheng training camp, the tens of thousands of Uzun recruits, and the 7,000 corpses of the Qinghai soldiers, the Uzun general at the front raised his head to the sky and let out a heaven-shaking roar. Flap flap. A few moments later, tens of thousands of carrier pigeons and eagles took to the skies. The news of Dian Pugil's death and the destruction of Zhangzheng recruit training camp quickly spread across the plateau and shook the empire. What? In the distant Uzun royal capital, this news caused a massive earthquake. Bang! In the smoke-filled hall, the Tsenpo slammed his palm on the table and stood up. Impossible! I don't believe it. How could something like this happen? What were Dusong Mengpoj and Hushu Wuzong doing? To kill 27,000 recruits, including the 7,000 Qinghai soldiers, isn't something that several thousand Tang soldiers could do. How could so many Tang people and such a large target go unnoticed? Just how did they get around the defense line? The Tsenpo was unable to restrain his anger. The massive impact caused his entire body to tremble. Ordinary recruits were one thing, but the 7,000 Qinghai soldiers and Dian Pugil were the essence of the empire. They were the culmination of the blood and sweat of the Uzun Empire, and the Tsenpo found it impossible to accept that they had been silently wiped out in a single night. Have you found any information on those Tang people? The Prime Minister of the Uzun Empire, Dalan Trinling, also asked. Compared to the furious Senpo, his expression was much calmer, but the trembling fingers beneath his sleeves betrayed the agitation in his heart. Dalan Trinling was no less shocked by this news than anyone else, but he had a composed mind and would not easily reveal it like the average person. But no matter what, the destruction of Zhangzhung recruit training camp was a massive blow to the empire. The Uzun Plateau towered into the clouds, far away from the surrounding countries. It was a land bestowed by the heavens to the people of the Uzun. It had been a very long time since the Tang people had fought their way onto the plateau, and there had never been so many Uzun deaths on the plateau. The last time something like this had happened was 30-some years ago. Even more unacceptable was that even now, no one knew how the Tang people's cavalry had managed to get around the numerous defense lines and reach the depths of the plateau. Replying to Prime Minister, "We've already investigated." According to the survivors of Zhangzhung recruit training camp, the attackers numbered around 5,000. The attackers should have been around 5,000. Their numbers aren't many, but they are extremely powerful. 5,000? Dalan Trinling couldn't help but grimace. The Uzun cavalry in Zhangzhung training camp numbered more than 20,000. If the other side also had this many people, it would be fine, but if they only had 5,000, that was far too astonishing. Correct. We've already asked many people, and we've all come to the same conclusion. The enemy's numbers are far inferior to ours. In addition, we also found a letter in Zhangzhung training camp, hanging on the Black War banner of Zhangzhung training camp. The commander of the Uzun reinforcements who had been the first to arrive at Zhangzhung training camp reported. "Bring it here," Dalan Trinling said. A commander of the reinforcements quickly stepped forward and respectfully offered a letter with both hands. Dalan Trinling opened the letter and quickly began to read. The words written on the letter were not in the Uzun language, but in Hanzi. But to Dalan Trinling, this was naturally no problem. To all the people of Uzun, those who offend the Central Plains will be executed, no matter how far away they may be. This was the case in ancient times, and it is the same now. In the Battle of Chishi, 5,000 Tang people were killed, General Pulin killed in battle. As the saying goes, it is impolite not to reciprocate. Today, I have come to the plateau to deliver a grand gift. I hope that all of you will kindly accept it. The young Marquis of the Tang dynasty, Wang Chong. Dalan Trinling's pupils constricted as he read the last line, his face paling. He had imagined all sorts of possibilities, like Geshu Han's long-distance raid, or Fomin Linta's ambush, but he had never expected this name. Wang Chong. In the Uzun, this name was receiving even more attention than Geshu Han or Fomin Linta. Dalan Trinling had imagined all sorts of possibilities, but he had never imagined that it would be him. The War of the Southwest had just concluded, and the plague on the plateau was still not over. Yet this name had once more appeared on the plateau, and it had even destroyed one of the 3 most prestigious recruit training centers of the Uzun Empire. Bastard! Dalan Trinling's hands were clenched, his face ashen, his mind exploding with killing intent. The incident at Sanka's Zhangzhung recruit training camp had spread to all of Uzun. At this moment, not just the royal capital, but even the distant north had received the news. The huge change had also caused a great shock here. No. Not just shock, but also extreme rage. Wang Chong. There was an earth-shattering roar. In an instant, a terrifying force filled with destructive power exploded, blowing a black tent into pieces. General. In the surroundings, the white braves retreated in fear. General Dian Pujiel had died in battle and Zhangzhung recruit training camp had been destroyed. Everyone knew that the general was at his most furious, most terrifying, and most dangerous. After all, the two of them shared the surname Dian, and they both hailed from the Dian clan. Wang Chong. I definitely won't let you go. Chapter 758. The Tsenpo's letter was now in his hands. He didn't say a single word, only handed over the letter that Wang Chong had left behind in Zhangzhung recruit training camp. 5,000 Tang people killed, General Pulin slain in battle. Others might not understand the meaning of Wang Chong's letter, but how could Dian Mengpoj not? Wasn't the person Wang Chong was referring to in the letter him? That Senpo's letter had not contained a single word, but the fact that he had given it to him was enough to make his intentions clear. This matter had arisen because of him, so it was up to him to resolve it. Wang Chong, I will definitely make you and the Tang dynasty you speak of regret. Dian Mengpoj tightly gripped Wang Chong's letter, his teeth clenched, his eyes brimming with frenzied killing intent. Zhangzhung training camp had been destroyed, Dian Pugil had been killed, and 7,000 Qinghai soldiers in training had been killed. Dian Mengpoj's heart was bleeding. Especially those 7,000 Qinghai soldiers. Once they were trained, they would become Uzun elites just like his white braves, but Wang Chong had killed every single one of them. This was the true reason why all of Uzun had been shaken and why Dian Mengpoj had gone mad. He had only killed Pulin He and 5,000 Qixi Protectorate soldiers, but Wang Chong had destroyed the entire Zhangzhung training camp, Dian Pugil, 7,000 Qinghai soldiers, and 20,000 new recruits. This vengeance was simply unimaginable. Even though Dian Mengpoj was known as the Azura of the battlefield and had experienced all sorts of battles, he still found it hard to accept. Because he had only heavily wounded the Qixi Protectorate, but Wang Chong had dealt a heavy blow to the entire empire. Wang Chong, I will kill you. I will definitely kill you. Dian Mengpoj clenched his teeth, his mind filled with an indescribable madness and impulsiveness. Pass on my order. Gather the army and prepare to attack the city of steel. But my lord, the city of steel is tall and sturdy, and we are cavalry. We do not have enough siege weapons, nor are we good at attacking cities. Moreover, our last attack has already infuriated Qixi Protector General Fomin Linta. He's currently putting all his strength into defending Qixi. With our strength, we might not be able to get around him. So what? If Fomin Linta dared to stop them, then they would attack Fomin Linta. No matter what, I will make the Tang dynasty pay the price. Dian Mengpoj almost roared out the last sentence. Fomin Linta was an imperial great general of the Tang dynasty, an existence on the same level as Dusong Mengpoj. In terms of pure strength, he was probably a little stronger. Not even Dusong Mengpoj dared to recklessly exchange blows with him, much less the Brigadier General Dian Mengpoj. But Dian Mengpoj couldn't care less. So what if Fomin Linta was there? He wanted to kill, he wanted to kill. A few moments later, Dian Mengpoj had mounted his horse and was charging toward Qixi. At the same time, in the distant Big Dipper city of Longxi, reporting. Lord Protector General, there's been a strange movement on the plateau. Our men have discovered that the Uzun army is making abnormal movements on the plateau. A horseman galloped into Big Dipper city, and the news brought back by this horseman immediately caused a stir in Big Dipper city. What are the Uzun doing? The last battle just ended. Are they planning on starting a new one so soon? The Big Dipper army had been stationed in Longxi for many years, facing off against the Uzun army for many years, so it was extremely observant of every movement on the plateau. In the eyes of the Big Dipper army, the strange movements of the Uzun army only had one meaning. This was the start of a new war. The Big Dipper army had never feared war. The only thing that angered them was that they had just been pushed back in the last battle, and now they were back with a vengeance. Was the ambition of the Uzun truly endless? My lord, have the entire army prepare for battle. The Uzun will never learn to teach. This time, they must be taught a harsh lesson. The Big Dipper army officers were seething with rage. Wait a moment. Don't jump to conclusions before we get to the bottom of this. Geshu Han said with a frown. Although the Uzun army's actions made one think of a new war, as a Longxi great general, Geshu Han instinctively sensed that something was amiss. Although the Uzun army loved to fight, they would usually only move out when they were confident in their victory. This time, even Witadra Konglo had retreated and no longer had an absolute advantage, and the other Uzun great generals would not be able to take advantage of him. The Uzun army should not be so impulsive. Scout, investigate again. Geshu Han said. Yes. The cavalryman received the order and quickly flew away. Around an hour later, a new piece of news flew into the city. The second piece of news left everyone slack-jawed. The Uzun Zhangsheng recruit training camp had been destroyed. 27,000 people had been killed, and the general in charge, Dian Pujiel, had been killed. Even 7,000 of the Uzun elite Qinghai soldiers had been killed, their corpses littering the ground. It had already been confirmed that the 5,000 Tang people had destroyed the camp, and the Uzun army was currently searching for how those 5,000 Tang people had managed to get up there. Even Geshu Han was flabbergasted by this news, let alone the Big Dipper army generals who had spent half their lives on the battlefield. As the garrison of Longxi, the Big Dipper army had a far greater understanding of the Uzun army than any other branch of the army. Thus, they were deeply aware of what Zhongka's Zhangsheng recruit training camp meant to the Uzun army. Geshu Han had wanted to launch a surprise attack and destroy Zhangsheng recruit training camp on more than one occasion, but because it was too deep and his army was too large, it was very easy for the Uzun to discover him, and there was also the possibility of his retreat being cut off. For various reasons, he had been forced to give up. Leading his battle-hardened subordinates, Geshu Han analyzed, deduced, and analyzed the situation. In the end, Geshu Han came to this conclusion: it wasn't that Zhangsheng recruit training camp couldn't be destroyed, but it required at least 30,000 soldiers, 10,000 of them cavalry. At the same time, an imperial great general like Geshu Han had to personally move out. This was because Dian Pujiel was a Saint Martial Realm expert, and only a Saint Martial Realm expert could deal with him. But a person like Dian Pujiel would immediately flee the moment he discovered that the leader was Geshu Han. The Big Dipper army, which was primarily made up of infantry, simply couldn't catch up and could only lament their inadequacy. And if Dian Pujiel didn't give up, he would use all sorts of methods to delay. When the time came, the price of attacking Zhangsheng training camp would be far greater than imagined. In other words, attacking Zhangsheng training camp was simply unrealistic. But now, Zhangsheng training camp had been destroyed, and the enemy was 5,000 Tang dynasty cavalry. To the Big Dipper army of Longxi, there was no news more shocking than this. In normal circumstances, no one in the Big Dipper army would have believed this. After all, Zhangsheng was so far away, but this news had come from Uzun's own people, and it had come from a Big Dipper army scout who had captured an Uzun horseman, so there was no mistake. Is it someone from Qixi? Geshu Han frowned and said after a few moments of thought. No. I'm not sure about that Uzun man who was captured, but based on what he said, it's someone from Wushang. The kneeling scout said. Buzz. The name Wushang was like a boulder falling to the ground, and everyone's eyes went wide. Wushang? How could this be? Did you hear wrongly? Everyone's first reaction was that it was impossible. Everyone knew that Wushang was alone, and he was a subordinate of one person. Moreover, the Big Dipper army had interacted with him. But how could a 17-year-old youth possibly break into the highlands, penetrate deep into Uzun territory, and kill so many Uzun cavalry, as well as 7,000 of Uzun's most elite Qinghai soldiers? Crucially, how had he managed to sneak in without them noticing? There's no mistake. The scout at the front is proficient in Uzun. He can be sure that the one mentioned is Wushang. The kneeling scout lowered his head and hurriedly said. The hall instantly fell deathly still. Everyone, including Geshu Han, was silent. Wushang City. Wang Chong, 5,000 cavalry, destroying Zhangsheng training camp, all of this was too much of a shock to the crowd. All this time, they had looked down on that brat Wushang, but no one had expected him to be capable of such an astonishing feat. This piece of news was too shocking for everyone. I didn't expect it to be him again. In the southwest of the Uzun highlands, Huishu Wuzong stood on the edge of a steep cliff, gazing down at the turbulent air currents below. The incident with Tsangka had shaken the entire highlands, and the news had also reached him. At this moment, no one was feeling more conflicted than Hushu Wuzong. He had never expected that he would hear the name, Wang Chong, so soon after that battle. It seems that we still need to put an end to all of this. Hushu Wuzong raised his head and sighed. Suddenly, he grabbed the scimitar hanging from a protruding rock and strode away. Nay! At this moment, in Longxi, no matter how chaotic the Uzan Plateau was, no matter what sort of impact Sanka's matter had on the protector generals and armies of Longxi and Qixi, the area around Heaven Pillar Peak was in a state of turmoil. With the battle over, Wang Chong was in no hurry to leave. Instead, he chose to rest and reorganize near Heaven Pillar Peak. The area around Heaven Pillar Peak was covered in a thick forest that obscured the sky, and the difference in altitude of 4,000 to 5,000 meters made it impossible to see anything even from the plateau. What were the losses in this battle? Did you find out? At the base of Heaven Pillar Peak, beneath the crown of a 20-zhang tall tree, Wang Chong had gathered his officers for a meeting. Chapter 759. In the assault on Zhangzheng training camp, 80 people were heavily injured, all of them caused by Dian Pugil's outburst. In addition, 30 were lightly injured and 7 were killed in battle. Including those who died in battle, 2 men and 1 cavalry have brought them back. In addition, the heavily injured have taken the pills provided by Marquis and have all been treated. Su Kei said. He was currently in charge of logistics at Wang Chong's side. Marquis, this time, we killed more than 20,000 people, but we only sustained 120 casualties. 7 deaths is truly astonishing. That's right. The Wushang soldiers are truly formidable fighters. Everyone sighed in amazement at this number. For Zhangzheng training camp to only have 100-some casualties was truly inconceivable. If this number had been made public before the battle, no one would have believed it. But when Wang Chong heard this number, he slightly frowned. This number was even greater than he had imagined. Cavalry had always been different from infantry in a battle. When 2 groups of infantry clashed, it was common for them to lose 800 in order to kill 1,000. In fact, even the most powerful elite infantrymen could suffer heavy losses in a single round of battle. But cavalry was different. Cavalry relied on the power of a collective charge. It was like a sharp blade. Either it couldn't cut through the enemy's camp, but once it did, it would immediately cause great damage to the enemy. However, due to the cavalry's high speed, it wouldn't suffer too much damage if it passed by in a flash. Thus, even in a battle of 10,000 cavalry against 100,000 infantry, it was extremely normal for the infantry to lose less than half while the cavalry would lose no more than 1,000, perhaps only a few hundred. The Wushang cavalry had only just been established, but they had already suffered 80 heavy injuries, 30 light injuries, and 7 deaths. To Wang Chong, this number was far greater than he had expected. In the surroundings, Su Kei, Qing Sanyuan, Su Shixian, and even Li Sai sensed Wang Chong's frown. Even someone as steady as Li Sai couldn't help but click his tongue. Wang Chong's requirements seemed to be much higher than they had imagined. With 5,000 against 27,000, the number of casualties was only slightly more than 100, and only 7 had truly died. Yet, Wang Chong was still not satisfied. If word of this got out, even the generals and protector generals of the Tang dynasty at the borders would probably be jealous. I've only been training for half a month. It seems that I still need to improve further. In addition, the extraterrestrial meteoric iron and the Wuzi steel sword had to be expedited. Both of them must be shipped here as soon as possible. Wang Chong thought to himself. The Mamelukes of the past had all been equipped with Wuzi steel swords, capable of killing gods and Buddhas alike. Alas, with the invasion of the otherworldly invaders and the destruction of the Arabian Empire, those 10,000 Wuzi steel swords had vanished with them. Thus, even in the later stages of the apocalyptic era, Wang Chong's Wushang cavalry had not been able to equip those invincible Wuzi steel swords. But now, everything was different. Wang Chong could not only equip all his Wushang cavalry with Wuzi steel swords, but he could also equip them with the extraterrestrial meteoric iron armor, which was much stronger than the Uzun plate armor. In the future, the Wushang cavalry would reach an unprecedented level, even stronger than the Wushang cavalry that had once been hailed as the supreme force of the world. But it was precisely for this reason that Wang Chong viewed this army with great importance. After all, the number of people in Wushang village was limited, and each death meant one less. Regarding these elite soldiers among the elite soldiers, no matter how much one valued them, it would never be too much. Cousin had already set off 3 months ago, and he even rode the monsoon wind to go there. Based on the time, he should be able to return in a month or so. When he thought of cousin Wang Liang, a bright light flashed through Wang Chang's eyes. On his first trip overseas, Wang Liang had been tempered, drifting here and there, experiencing the hearts of men and the dangers of the environment. In the middle of this journey, he had spent several months searching for those islands with extraterrestrial meteoric iron. But now, with his first success and experience, coupled with that group of skilled sailors, everything was different. At the very least, he wouldn't have to experience as many dangers as last time, and he wouldn't have to spend more than half a year. Riding the monsoon winds and then riding the monsoon winds back would only take a little more than 4 months. I'm really looking forward to it, Wang Chong quietly said to himself. With the return from the first voyage, Wang Chong had invested even more in Wang Liang's second voyage than the first, and the expedition was also much larger. This meant that even more extraterrestrial meteoric iron could be brought back, and it would definitely be much more than the first voyage. As these thoughts flitted through his mind, Wang Chong quickly returned to normal. That's right, how is the army doing after coming down from the plateau? Have you taken stock? Wang Chong looked at Su Kei and said. Everyone's expressions flickered at these words. Of the 5,000, more than 1,000 have developed diarrhea, and more than 300 have developed a mild fever. The others are also feeling a little uncomfortable. Before Su Kei could say anything, Cheng Sanyuan interrupted. Strangely enough, nothing like this had happened on the plateau, but now that they were off the plateau, the 5,000 soldiers were starting to develop all sorts of symptoms. Cheng Sanyuan, Su Kei, and the other officers had been discussing this problem for a very long time, and all of them were deeply worried. It was said that the Uzun Plateau was a promised land bestowed by the heavens to the Uzun people. Cheng Sanyuan's men had never felt much of a thing before, and they would even snort disdainfully when discussing it. But now, no one dared to think this way. The strength of the 5,000 Wushang cavalry was obvious to all, but if even they were like this after a trip to the plateau, then the rest of the people were even less likely to be like this. Marquis, is this altitude sickness? Li Sai stared at Wang Chong and asked. He had been with Wang Chong for a long time, so he knew a little about it. Wang Chong nodded, a hint of melancholy in his eyes. Altitude sickness was indeed a huge problem, and it had something to do with the fact that he had quickly given the order to retreat after besieging Zhangzheng training camp. The people of the Wushang villagers spent most of their time in the mountains, and their physical fitness far surpassed that of ordinary people in all aspects. Wang Chong had initially thought that it would not be so serious, but it seemed that he had still greatly underestimated the severity of altitude sickness. The people of the Uzun people called the plateau a blessed land, and they claimed that anyone who entered the plateau would be cursed. With this unique natural barrier, they could attack and retreat as they pleased. They had been constantly harassing and invading the surrounding countries, and now it seemed that there was a reason for it. Marquis, the plateau is indeed the territory of the Uzun people. I'm afraid it will be very difficult for us to stay on the plateau for long. Su Kei, Cheng Sanyuan, and the others looked worried. Wang Chong said nothing. If altitude sickness was serious, it could indeed cause people to stop breathing and even die. Compared to these serious consequences, the symptoms of the 5,000 Wushang cavalry were actually very mild. But no matter how serious the altitude sickness was, it was still a mountain that Wang Chong had to conquer. It seems that I'll have to put that matter on the agenda ahead of time. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. In this era, the majority of people were ignorant of altitude sickness, even in a state of blind reverence. Even the invading Turks had a deep reverence for the plateau. But Wang Chong knew that there was a way to overcome altitude sickness. But this matter needed to be carried out in secret and could not be made public. Otherwise, if too many people learned of it, there would definitely be negative effects. After resting here for a few more days, we'll return to the City of Steel. Wang Chong said. Yes, Marquis. The officers respectfully replied. After resting for a few days at Heaven Pillar Mountain, the army soon returned to the City of Steel. The moment they returned to the City of Steel, Wang Chong immediately summoned the steward that Yang Hongchang had dispatched to the City of Steel. Marquis. The old steward stepped into the reception hall, saw Wang Chong, and respectfully bowed. Steward Yang, help me notify your patriarch. Have him purchase something for me in the western regions. Wang Chong said. He was seated in an armchair, one hand holding a white porcelain cup, the other lightly wiping away the froth from the tea. What does Marquis want? As long as our Yang clan can do it, we will not hesitate to risk our lives. The old steward sternly said. There's no need to be so serious. I only need your patriarch to help me buy a small item. Wang Chong did not beat around the bush, getting straight to the point. This is a small red flower that grows on the Uzan Plateau. It's called Rosedale. Rosedale? The old steward creased his brow, a hint of confusion in his eyes. He spent most of his time in the western regions and knew everything there was to know, but he had never heard of the name Rosedale. Marquis, forgive me for my ignorance, but based on my knowledge, no one in the western regions buys or sells Rosedale. The old steward had dabbled in the field of herbs, and the Yang clan had once sold them, but the old steward had no impression of them. Uzan did not sell many things in the western regions, so if there was a Rosedale, he would definitely have an impression of it, and there was no mistaking it. Ha, it's even better if no one buys it. All you need to do is tell your patriarch to secretly buy it for me. That small red flower is a very common wildflower on the plateau. Tell your patriarch that I'm buying it for the Arabs to feed to the horses and relieve their bowels. As Wang Chong spoke, he took out a piece of paper from a nearby drawer and handed it over. I've already drawn the appearance of the Rosedale. Have your patriarch buy it based on this. There's no mistake. Understood, Marquis. I'll do it now. The old steward took the paper and left. Now that he had a drawing of the Rosedale, everything would be much easier. Given the influence the Yang clan had built up over the western regions for so many years, they would be able to find it for Wang Chong even if they had to dig 3 feet into the ground. To think that no one knows about the Rosedale. It's truly surprising that no one has shown interest in it for so long. After watching the old steward leave, Wang Chong closed his eyes, took a sip of tea, and leaned back in contemplation. The Uzan Plateau had become a natural barrier that protected the Uzan Empire. Anyone from other empires that entered this place would be greatly weakened, including the Arabs and the powerful Mamelukes. Chapter 760. Who could have imagined that these small red flowers, so common on the plateau, could actually help martial artists increase their lung capacity, increase the activity and adaptability of their cells, and allow them to live on the plateau like the Uzan people? But no one else besides Wang Chong knew of this method. If the Uzan people knew of this, they would definitely do everything in their power to get rid of this red stone crop. It wasn't as if this had never happened before. This was why Wang Chong had done so much to conceal this secret, even having Yang Hongchang use the name of the Arabs to purchase it. Where there was profit, there would be motivation. Although no one was currently buying and selling the red stone crop, once Yang Hongchang bought it, it would appear on the market. And it would definitely be the Uzan people who would gather and sell it. Not even if they were beaten to death would they ever imagine that Wang Chong was buying these things to use against them. Everything is ready except for the east wind. It's time to move on to the next phase of the plan. Wang Chong put down his teacup and lightly tapped the table with his right index finger, a profound light in his eyes. Zhang Ke. Wang Chong called out. Marquis, this lowly one is here. Very quickly, a thin and small figure with a rock eagle on his shoulder walked in with large strides. He seemed to have been waiting outside the hall for a long time. Do you still remember the plan I told you about? Now, take your eagle team and go out to investigate. I want to know what's going on there at all times, especially if the Uzan people appear there. Wang Chong said. Understood. Be at ease, Marquis. This lowly one will not fail this mission. Zhang Ke was eager to go, his face brimming with excitement. After bowing, Zhang Ke impatiently took his leave. Wang Chong was now placing more and more importance on him, and a scholar would die for a bosom friend. Thus, Zhang Ke was more eager than anyone else to carry out a mission given to him by Wang Chong. Time slowly passed, and the city of steel once more fell into silence. After a few brief clashes, the border between Qixi and Uzan returned to its usual calm. In the northwest, while everyone's attention was focused on Uzan, Qixi, and Wushang, in the southwest corner of Uzan's northern border, at the place closest to Wushang, several small shadows had appeared and were silently observing. Captain, is this the place Marquis asked us to investigate? At the bottom of the plateau, a member of the Eagle team looked up and said. To be honest, other than the precipitous terrain, they couldn't see anything special about this place. There wasn't even a single Uzan cavalry. Yes. Zhang Ke nodded. But I don't see anything special here. Furthermore, there isn't even a single Uzan cavalryman. Are we supposed to just stand here and watch? Another member of the Eagle team said. Hey. Hearing this, Zhang Ke finally turned his head and glanced at his companion behind him. In all the world, there is still no one who dares to question Marquis like this. The last was Hushu Wuzong and Daluan Ruozan, and all of you saw what happened to them. Not too long ago, there was also Dian Mangpoj. In the end, his cousin, Dian Pugiel, was killed by Marquis, and he even destroyed Zhangzheng training camp. In the northwest, if Marquis were to fart, the protector generals and great generals of the empire, and the Uzan great generals of the plateau would probably spend half a day studying it. No one can keep up with Marquis's thoughts. At the very least, I don't dare to question Marquis's decisions. Hearing Zhang Ke's words, the members of the Eagle squad standing behind him awkwardly fell silent. Captain, you're the closest to Marquis, so why don't you tell your brother what we're doing here? A quick-witted member of the Eagle team nudged Zhang Ke's arm, a fawning expression on his face. Whether it was in the capital of the Tang dynasty or in the northwest, the young Marquis of the Tang dynasty was known for his intelligence and farsightedness. There were many times when his actions seemed ordinary and unremarkable, but later on, it would be proven that they had clear goals, intentions, and decisions that had been made after careful consideration. In the City of Steel, many people would speculate on what Lord Marquis would do next in their free time. This, Zhang Ke instantly hesitated. Captain, just tell us. That's right, hurry up and tell us. The other members of the Eagle team began to clamor. Forget it. This is just my speculation. You absolutely can't tell anyone. Zhang Ke hesitated for a very long time, but in the end, he couldn't stand up to the clamor. Look carefully at this area. Doesn't it look like a very large triangle? When Marquis goes to war, he never makes a decision without reason. As long as a few people are stationed on this triangle, it will be easy to defend and difficult to attack. The Uzan can attack us from here at any time, and if they can't win, they can retreat. But it will be very difficult for us to attack. This is the steep terrain you speak of. Zhang Ke was no fledgling. After spending many years at the Eagle's side, he had heard many of Wang Chang's exploits and understood many things about the battlefield. In particular, he had gone on an expedition with Wang Chong, so he had some understanding of military affairs. If Wang Chong heard Zhang Kei's words, he would assuredly have a whole new level of respect for him, because Zhang Kei truly had guessed a few things. But even this is useless. Even if Marquis occupies this place, he won't be able to defend it. Does Marquis intend to build a fortress here? A member of the Eagle team said. That's right. Even if we occupy it, it's useless. Besides, the area in front of us is flat land, perfect for the charge of Uzun warhorses. With our backs against the cliff, isn't that just a dead end? Another member of the Eagle team said. This. I don't know. Marquis definitely has his reasons for doing this. How could we possibly guess at them? Zhang Kei said. We should hurry and investigate and report to Marquis. If we delay Marquis's plan, none of us will be able to bear the consequences. Everyone's hearts tightened at these words, and they put away their joking thoughts. Cree. In the blink of an eye, the birds on everyone's shoulders and arms soared into the sky. Boom! Hammer after hammer smashed down on the red-hot iron, sending sparks and roiling clouds of smoke. Widening his field of vision, he could see blacksmiths all around him with their arms bare, their backs drenched in sweat as they hammered furiously again and again. Hurry! Everyone, put in more effort. The people from the capital have already urged us 3 times. This is a major client, the son of heaven's disciple. If we mess it up, Lady Su won't forgive us. She won't come looking for us in the future. In the Tang dynasty's Jiangnan West Road, Hangzhou, in the Zhang clan's sword shop, a supervisor with a whip in his hand was making his way through the furnaces, lecturing them as he went. Flap flap. As he was speaking, a pigeon suddenly flew down. The supervisor's eyes flashed as he caught the pigeon and opened the letter in the bamboo tube, upon which his face rapidly paled. All of you, hurry up. This is the 4th time that Lady Su has sent a letter to urge us. If we don't forge 20 steel plates by today, none of us can sleep. The supervisor loosened the whip in his hand, and with a swish, he lashed it viciously in the air. After patrolling the sword shop a few times, he quickly strode away. After leaving the sword shop and crossing the threshold to the main gate, he saw 2 stone lions standing guard. In front of the lions were rows of carriages, apparently waiting for something. Have all the modules been loaded? The supervisor asked the clan leader on the first carriage. They're all loaded. We can set out at any time. The middle-aged commander with slender arms and a cold expression said seriously. Several months ago, no one would have known what the word module was or what it meant. But now, in the entire Jiangnan West Road, as long as it was related to blacksmithing, everyone would know of it. Everyone was used to it. All the swordsmiths, sword shops, and swordsmithing clans of the Jiangnan West Road probably knew of this word. Okay, let's set out. Don't delay the young Marquis's business. If something happens, we won't be able to bear the consequences. This is a rare big client, and the family values it very much. Don't make any mistakes. There won't be any problems, the supervisor sternly said. Lord Steward, be at ease. The clan has already sent 60 experts. There won't be any problems. The stern-faced leader of the clan quickly gave the order to set off. Go! With a shout, a whip lashed through the void, and the entire convoy set off with a rumbling sound. Neigh! The neigh of horses resounded through the air as the Zhang clan's convoy set out, followed closely behind it. If one looked down from the sky, one would see that all of Hong province was being transported by one convoy after another for Wangchong. Even larger, the Jiangnan West Road and all the prefectures and commanderies of the Tang dynasty were being transported by the Zhang clan's caravans, forming a flood that traveled along the Silk Road toward the distant Wushang. It was like a massive machine slowly turning. Behind Wang Chang's every decision were the countless clans and prefectures of the Tang dynasty, all of them providing him with blood and support. Yang Hongchang's efficiency was much faster than he had imagined. Several days after Wang Chang's order was passed down, in the early morning, while everyone was sleeping, a convoy carrying 2 wooden chests, tightly nailed down, was escorted into the City of Steel by a group of guards. Marquis, fortunately, we did not disappoint you. Following Marquis's directions, we found several chests of rhodiola. However, our clan head said that Marquis must have a deeper meaning in his actions. Whether or not this rhodiola is what Marquis wants is up to Marquis to decide. Once everything is confirmed, we can purchase it on a large scale and send it over in a steady stream. In the City of Steel, in a richly ornamented building, the old butler bowed and sincerely said, "Master, I've been waiting for you for a long time." Chapter 761. Wang Chong squinted at this sight, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair as he suddenly stood up and strode over. His right hand reached into the box and plucked out a small red flower. Its color and shape were exactly the same as in his memories. But even in his last life, he had never led an army to the plateau. Moreover, it had been 2 lifetimes, and it had not been a very important matter at the time, so some of his memories were hazy. Hiss! Bringing the red flower to his nose, Wang Chong lightly sniffed it. There was no mistake about it. This was the smell, faint but very fresh, of the soil of the plateau. It was exactly the same as in his memories. Someone. Take these 2 boxes with you. Tell your subordinates to put them in a pot and make them into soup. In addition, in the future, put a little in every dish in the army. Wang Chong suddenly summoned the guards in the hall. Yes, your subordinate will do so. A few guards quickly walked over. Wang Chong nodded and then turned to the old steward on his left. Tell your patriarch that I am very satisfied with this matter. Have him ship a large quantity of these things over. Yes. The old steward was overjoyed. There was no doubt that they had found the right thing. Only those who actually bought rhodiola would understand. Just as Wang Chong had said, this thing could be found everywhere on the plateau. It truly was a wild flower. The patriarch had only needed to spread the news, and a large number of shepherds had quickly arrived. Moreover, because it was said to be used for horse defecation, the price was unimaginably cheap. One could buy a large bundle for just a few taels of silver. It was easy, and he could also gain the favor of an important figure like the young Marquis. Why not? In addition, has there been any activity at Talas? Wang Chong asked. Replying to Marquis, there has been no news for now. The Arabs are doing as usual. Rest assured, Marquis, the patriarch said that since this matter was ordered by Marquis, our Yang family will definitely fight to the death. No matter what the Arabs do, even if it's a mosquito, they will definitely report it to Marquis. When the old butler heard the question, his expression turned solemn. He bowed and answered respectfully. Tell him to be ready at all times to answer my summons. Wang Chong said solemnly. Although the matter of Uzan and the Turks was important, the most important matter was Talas and Arabia. This was what Wang Chong was most concerned about. The old butler left very quickly. After he left, Wang Chong fell into deep thought. Up until now, the Arabs had shown no signs of movement, and no Arab soldiers had infiltrated Talas. The cicada senses the autumn wind before it moves. If the Arabs were making any strange movements, they would have noticed. In other words, he still had enough time. This can be said to be the best news I have right now. I hope that this battle at Talas will not be affected by my appearance and that there will be no new changes. Wang Chong quietly said to himself. Ever since his reincarnation, many things had changed. The fate of the Wang clan, the fate of the King of Song, the fate of the Southwest. Wang Chong was most worried about the butterfly effect that would cause everything to change, especially the timing. But it seemed that the Battle of Lishiluo had not changed much. At the very least, he had to first pacify the internal situation. If he wanted to stabilize Qixi and fend off Uzan to the west and the Turks to the east, he still had time. Preparedness ensures success, and unpreparedness ensures failure. Although the Arabian Empire hasn't shown any signs of movement yet, I still have to take precautions. After a few moments of thought, Wang Chong returned to his seat. He took a fine brush from the red sandalwood brush rack, dipped it in ink, and then began to write on a piece of paper. This letter was addressed to a person Wang Chong had never met, and Wang Chong didn't know if this letter would be of any use or if it could convince that person. But Wang Chong had no choice but to do this, because this matter was extremely important to him. If he succeeded, he might be able to avoid the first clash between the Arabs and the Tang dynasty. If the Battle of Talas had not occurred, or if it had been delayed, he would have had enough time to respond. To the young Marquis of the Wushang of the Tang dynasty, Wang Chong, to the Right Imperial Guard Great General, the Prefectural Duke of Miyun, rumble. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled outside the window, and dark clouds gathered. At the same time, the Stone of Fate's long-awaited voice resounded in his mind. However, it was different from the previous times. This time, the Stone of Fate's voice was much softer, and it lacked its usual sharpness. Note: user is touching the bottom line of the laws. Starting from now, for every second that passes, 10 points of destiny energy will be deducted. Depending on how serious user's condition is, additional points of destiny energy will be deducted, or even obliterated. Just as I expected. As Wang Chong heard the voice in his mind, he keenly noticed the change in the Stone of Destiny's wording. In the past, the Stone of Destiny had always used words like warning, but this time, although it directly began to deduct destiny energy, and at a rate of 10 points per second, which seemed severe, it wasn't the case at all. The Stone of Destiny's wording was no longer the usual warning. For the first time, it had used the words note, which were clearly much less severe. It's exactly as I guessed, Wang Chong quietly said to himself. After so long, he had gotten used to the Stone of Destiny's style, and Wang Chong had gradually begun to understand a few rules and principles. For example, the Stone of Destiny's judgments were clearly divided into different levels. At the highest level, failure would result in immediate obliteration, and there was basically no reward, only the consumption of destiny energy. For example, World Energy Restraint. In the past, this had been Wang Chong's greatest worry, but now that he had enough destiny energy, Wang Chong was no longer very concerned about this. The second was when there was a reward for a mission, but failure would result in obliteration, such as Empire's Elegy. The third was when there was a reward for a mission, but failure would result in a penalty of destiny energy. For example, the threat to Qixi, the mission to kill Dian Mangpoj. At the time, Wang Chong had deduced that there was another level below the Stone of Destiny, and there was no doubt that this was what he was doing. And things had played out just as he had predicted. Although it seemed severe, the penalty of 10 points per second was insignificant compared to what he was doing. In addition, the Stone of Destiny had used caution, not warning. Missions all have a context to follow, and there are rules that can be used. It now seems that the Stone of Destiny forbids the leaking of those major historical events with far-reaching effects. You can do it, you can participate in it, you can change it, but it forbids leaking it, and the consequences of violating this rule are extremely severe. But if it's just discussing, leaking, and changing a small part of this major event, using an unimportant method to explain it, then putting it simply, I'll be skirting the line, and there won't be any problems. As these thoughts flew through his mind, Wang Chong quickly calmed down and continued writing. In the end, this letter deducted 600 points of destiny energy from Wang Chong, but Wang Chong no longer cared. No matter how much destiny energy was deducted, to Wang Chong, the first thing was that he had verified his conjecture. If this method worked, he would have one more way to change his fate. Most importantly, if this letter could be of use, then no amount of destiny energy would be able to compare to it. I hope that person will listen to me. Wang Chong walked out of the window. The sky was overcast, and the rain was still pouring. On the walls, the craftsmen had already stopped to rest. In the northwest of the empire, in the region of Qixi bordering the desert, such a heavy rain was extremely rare. Cuckoo! The pigeon cawed in Wang Cheng's hand. Wang Cheng stuffed the letter into a small bamboo tube and quickly released it. The messenger pigeon seemed to have sensed something. Its round eyes turned a few times before it suddenly spread its wings and turned into a bolt of lightning. It soared into the sky in the thunderstorm and quickly disappeared into the sky. Whoosh! His gaze followed the messenger pigeon through the curtain of rain, across the heavy void, all the way to the northwest. The pigeon did not stop, swiftly flying over the Qixi Protectorate headquarters. Regardless of day or night, it continued northwest, passing through the bustling kingdoms of the west and following the Silk Road to the distant Song Mountains. Finally, it stopped at the farthest western border of the empire, the 4 garrisons of Anxi. Whoosh! With a flap of its wings, the gray pigeon shot down from the sky like an arrow, descending into the estate below. The estate was surrounded by guards, all of them fully armored and armed to the teeth. Some of them were even equipped with ballistae and other heavy weapons. It appeared to be heavily guarded and intimidating. The 2 black Qilins at the gate raised their heads to the sky, their fierce and savage expressions a testament to the authority of the estate's master. In truth, on the western border of the empire, in the entire western regions, there was no place more noble and authoritative than this estate. Whether it was the kingdoms of the western regions or the merchants of the Abbasid Caliphate or Karak Spazinu, all of them were under the control of the master of this estate. Anxi Protectorate Headquarters. The plaque on the gate was made of Xian iron, and the words cast in iron and silver waves were written on it, revealing the true identity of the master of the estate. This was the core of the 4 garrisons of Anxi, the farthest point of authority on the western border of the empire. All the elites from the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains, the various prefectures, and the border defenses would eventually be sent here, to this strategic fortress far from the capital, far from the Central Plains, and far from the imperial favor. Whoosh whoosh! Drop after drop of rain fell from the clouds in the sky, onto the roof tiles, onto the eaves, and into the canal under the eaves. The fine drizzle blurred the line between heaven and earth, shrouding the world in a layer of green mist. Interesting. In the open room was a handsome and elegant middle-aged man of around 30 or 40 years of age, dressed in magnificent armor, exuding a dignified air. He was currently examining a letter in his hand with great interest. His eyes were long and narrow, a rarely seen single eye among men, but they also exuded the bearing and dignity of a man who had been tempered through 100 bloody battles. His appearance was very similar to that of the Han of the Central Plains, but upon closer inspection, it was also completely different. Although few people in the Central Plains recognized him, in the western regions, whether it was Anxi or Arabia, there were probably very few people who did not recognize him, and even fewer who did not know his name. Chapter 762. This was the most powerful man in the western regions, from Qixi all the way to the Song Mountains of the Tang dynasty. Other than the Anxi Protectorate that everyone was familiar with, the commander of tens of thousands of the Tang dynasty's elite soldiers, the master of the finest weapons, and the enviable imperial great general, he also had a host of other titles, including Right Imperial Guard Great General and Prefecture Duke of Miyun. Duke, Marquis, Count, Viscount, Baron, and below Imperial Prince, Gao Xianji was a duke, and his status was even higher than that of the Marquis. However, Gao Xianji, as Protector General, was permanently stationed on the western border, so all of his positions were remote. Changqing, come and take a look. The young Marquis of our Tang dynasty, the son of Heaven's disciple favored by the Holy Emperor, actually wrote us a letter like this. The corners of Gao Xianji's mouth twitched slightly, revealing an indecipherable smile. At the same time, he passed the letter in his hand to a man behind him. He was short and slightly hunched. Although he was ugly, his eyes were clear and bright. Seeing the smile on his commander's face, Feng Changqing, who was also an advisor and commander of the army, had a strange look in his eyes. He had followed the army for so long that he knew his commander's personality like the back of his hand. The Protector General had a calm and steady temperament, firm and resolute in battle, as steady as a mountain. It was very rare to see him show this sort of expression. Lord Protector General, could it be that the youngest son of the Wang clan has a request for milord? Feng Changqing guessed. Wushang was the territory of Qixi Protector General Fomen Linta. Given that person's personality and the presence of biting Protector General and Sis Han, Big Dipper Great General Geshu Han, and the other Hu Great Generals, his situation was probably not very good. Hey, Changqing, even you have times where your guess is wrong. Gao Xianji stroked his mustache and chuckled. It's the exact opposite of what you think. Not only is he not asking us for help, it seems like we are the ones asking him for help. Just take a look and you'll understand. Oh. Feng Changqing's eyes flashed, finally revealing a strange and astonished expression. This answer had completely taken him by surprise. Someone of the Protector General's status, authority, and strength would actually request the youngest son of the Wang clan from Wushang. The real situation should be the other way around. However, Feng Changqing's personality had never been one to get to the bottom of things. He preferred to investigate things himself, and he trusted his own judgment and judgment more. Lowering his head, Feng Changqing opened the letter and read it carefully. Slowly, the expression on Feng Changqing's face became more and more strange. In the end, he became silent and pondered. He had to admit that the contents of this letter had surpassed his expectations. He suddenly understood why the Protector General had such a strange expression. Wang family's youngest son advised us not to attack Stone Country. Feng Changqing turned around and looked at the commander-in-chief before him. In all his years in Anxi, Feng Changqing had read countless letters and opened countless memorials, but this was the first time he had ever seen such a baffling letter that left him scratching his head in confusion. The Shi Kingdom was located to the west of the Tsong Mountains, outside the territory of the Tang dynasty. It was one of the 9 clans of Xiaowu, the Shi Kingdom, the Kang Kingdom, the An Kingdom, and the other 3 kingdoms that were neutral between the Tang dynasty and Arabia. All the Hu merchants traveling between the east and the west along the Silk Road had to pass through the Shi Kingdom. In truth, the Anxi Protectorate had always been at peace with the Shi Kingdom, and the Anxi Protectorate had never attacked the Shi Kingdom. Wang Chang's letter was completely out of the blue, leaving him scratching his head in confusion. With Gao Xianji and Feng Changqing's status as the twin paragons of the empire, they could completely ignore such an inexplicable letter. But in reality, the atmosphere in the hall was completely different. Gao Xianji and Feng Changqing, the 2 important officials of the empire, had very subtle expressions on their faces. Do you now understand why I said interesting? Gao Xianji's eyes seemed to contain a deeper meaning. But, milord, how did he know? Feng Changqing finally said. As the deputy minister of Anxi, he was known as the wise advisor with flawless plans. There were very few things that could surprise him, but at this moment, Feng Changqing felt like he was seeing a ghost as he stared at the letter in his hand. Attacking the Shi Kingdom was probably still the only idea in the commander's mind. In the Anxi Protectorate, in the entire Tang dynasty, there were very few people who knew about this, and the plan had not even been drafted yet. How did a teenager several thousand li away know? Ha, I only told you about the plan to attack the Shi Kingdom. No one else knows, not even Duan Xiushi and the others. In other words, in all of Anxi, only you and I know. I want to know, how did this youngest son of the Wang clan know? Gao Xianji said. The 2 generals of Anxi had extremely strange expressions on their faces. The letter in Feng Changqing's hand from Wushang was like a riddle. For the first time, the 2 of them could not understand this youngest son of Wushang's. It was clear that the information they had obtained was not complete. This youngest son of the Wang clan was definitely very different from what they knew. The hall was quiet, no one speaking. This strange atmosphere persisted for some time before it was finally broken. Milord, then, should we reconsider? Feng Changqing probed. He's just a teenager. Do you think we're going to change our plans just because of a few words? Upon hearing those words, Gao Xianji smiled instead. As the commander of Anxi, one of the empire's supreme great generals, Gao Xianji had his own pride and confidence. Since he had decided to attack the Shi kingdom, he naturally had ample reason to do so. How could he change his mind just because of a few words from another? And no matter how formidable Wang Chong was, he was still just the young marquis, his status below that of the prefectural Duke of Miyun, and his experience in battle was also far inferior. How could Gao Xianji be so easily swayed? Understood. Then your subordinate will pretend that I never saw it. Feng Changqing said as he tore the letter in his hand into pieces. If there's nothing else, your subordinate will go and arrange matters related to the Shi kingdom. Feng Changqing turned to leave, but he had barely reached the door when he heard a familiar voice. Wait a moment. Gao Xianji called out to Feng Changqing, his brow tightly furrowed as a pensive look appeared in his eyes. Put off the attack on the Shi kingdom for the time being. Send a few scouts to investigate first. Understood. Feng Changqing turned his head and smiled, not surprised in the slightest. It was clear that the words of the youngest son of the Wang clan had affected the commander. Your subordinate will go and arrange it. Stepping over the threshold, Feng Changqing vanished from the hall. When a stone fell into the lake, it would definitely cause waves and ripples to spread out. At this moment, no one, not even Gao Xianji, or Feng Changqing, knew of the effects of Wang Chang's letter. But as Feng Changqing stepped over the threshold, in the distant Wushang, Wang Chong heard a familiar voice. Congratulations, user. You have been rewarded with 60 points of destiny energy. Outside the window, the drizzle had gradually stopped. Wang Chong sat cross-legged on his bed, silently cultivating. When he heard the voice in his head, he couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. This reward had come without any warning, and it was only 60 points of destiny energy. It was completely different from any other reward he had received in the past. Is it Anxi? Wang Chong's brow creased in thought. The only thing he could think of that was related to this matter was the letter he had written to Gao Xianji. A reward of 60 points of destiny energy, and without any warning at all. Is it effective or not? Or is it that everything has yet to be decided, and I need to wait for further developments? Wang Chong's mind was completely muddled. Reporting. As he was lost in thought, he suddenly heard a loud voice. The door opened, and a dusty messenger walked in, accompanied by a gust of cold wind. He knelt on the ground. Marquis, a lady has come to see you. She has Marquis's warrant and claims to be a descendant of the capital's Huang clan. What? Wang Chong's eyes brightened, and he immediately stood up from his bed. Before the messenger could react, a gust of wind blew past him, and Wang Chong vanished from the hall. Rumble. Wang Chong had just walked out of the hall when he heard the clattering of metal. The distant gates of the city of steel opened, and Ney heard the clear and resounding cry of a horse. Outside the city gates, a divine steed with glossy fur and 4 jade-white hooves galloped over, its mane flapping in the wind. Ha, little shadow. Seeing this stalwart divine steed, Wang Chong was incomparably excited, and he let out a sharp howl. The divine steed was even more excited than Wang Chong. Its hooves galloped forward, leaving a cloud of dust behind it as it charged straight at Wang Chong. Ha ha ha, little fellow, long time no see. Wang Chong grabbed the reins with one hand while rubbing the white-hoofed shadow's head with the other. The white-hoofed shadow also burrowed into Wang Chong's chest, rubbing against his body in an extremely affectionate manner. Because the situation in Wushang was still unsettled, and there were many things waiting to be done, Wang Chong had not brought the white-hoofed shadow with him. But now that the city of steel was on the right track and the battles were getting more frequent, the white-hoofed shadow was slowly being put to use. This was especially true for the attack on Uzun's Zhangsheng recruit training camp. Although Wang Chong had been riding the best warhorse of the Western Turkic Khaganate, it had died in a single charge against Dian Pugil. It was simply not enough to satisfy the requirements of an expert of Wang Chong's level. This made the white-hoofed shadow even more important. Wang Chong had long ago sent a letter to the capital to summon it, but it had only now arrived at the City of Steel. Being Marquis really is different. You can only see the horse, but not the person. Suddenly, a cold voice that sounded like the chirping of an oriole resounded from above, and it carried a trace of ridicule. Wang Chong's body froze as he raised his head. Only now did he notice the beautiful girl on the back of the horse, dressed in light yellow, her expression as cold as that of a goddess. Chapter 763. How could that be? Didn't I prepare a gift for you? Wang Chong smiled and opened his palm, revealing a pair of teardrop-shaped earrings of exquisite workmanship. These were the high-quality agates that Yang Hongchang had presented to Wang Chong not too long ago. Wang Chong had found the best craftsmen in the western regions to make them into a pair of earrings. It was perfect for Huang Qianer. As expected, Huang Qianer's eyes, so cold that they could kill, immediately became much more pleasant upon seeing this pair of exquisite earrings. She coldly harumphed and shot a vicious glare at Wang Chong, but she still accepted the pair of agate earrings. I've brought the white-hoofed shadow to you. I'll leave the rest to you. Huang Qianer dismounted and handed the reins to Wang Chong. Someone, bring young Lady Qianer inside to rest. Find a few maids to serve her well. Wang Chong took the reins and gave an order. Wushang was a long journey from the capital, and the journey had been arduous. Although Huang Qianer had said nothing, Wang Chong could not understand that a girl like Huang Qianer was willing to travel all the way from the capital. After having Huang Qianer taken care of, Wang Chong quickly left with the white-hoofed shadow. While Wang Chong was welcoming Huang Qianer and his white-hoofed shadow in the City of Steel, in the distant capital, an abnormally intense debate was taking place in the imperial court. 10 million taels of gold. Are you joking? Where does the imperial court get so much money to squander? And who knows if those people can be trusted? That's right. The silver of the imperial court is spent like water every year. 600,000 to 700,000 soldiers, the food for the horses, and the officials in various places. Which place doesn't need money? If there's a drought or flood, don't you need to prepare some money in advance? If all the money is spent on the army, what about other places? And 10 million taels of gold isn't a small sum. Do we have to give 10 million taels to anyone who asks? This is gold, gold. It's not silver, nor is it 10 million copper coins. The debate in the imperial court was extremely intense. The imperial censors, assistant ministers, all the officials of the 6 ministries, and even the dukes and nobles of the imperial court all joined in. Everyone quarreled. Bastard! What did he mean by casually taking out 10 million taels? These were warhorses that the imperial court lacked the most. This is something that can't be bought with money. When the nest is overturned, no eggs can remain intact. If the skin is gone, how can the hair attach to it? These war horses are used to protect the country. If they can't even protect the country, what's the point of talking about anything else? Everything has its priorities. If you can't even bear to spend money on such an important matter, then what else is worth spending money on? That's right. The young Marquis was a Marquis personally appointed by His Majesty and given a courtesy name by the Son of Heaven. If not even his words could be trusted, what else could be trusted? Don't tell me you don't even believe in His Majesty's foresight. The imperial court doesn't have any pastures, so they can't raise a large number of warhorses. This is an opportunity that has been presented to us. It's a once-in-a-blue-moon opportunity that can't be missed. It would be too late for regrets if you wanted to buy it in the future. No matter how precious 10 million taels of gold is, can it be more important than the safety of the Tang dynasty? The imperial court was clearly divided into 2 factions, neither willing to give in. 300,000 warhorses, and the best warhorses of the Turks at that. This was something that would have been unimaginable in the past. Almost all the generals of the army were participating, and all of them knew that this was an enormous opportunity. You're going all out to fight. You're going all out to fight. As long as I, Wenfugu, still have a single breath left in me, I will never allow you to do this. Next to the cinnabar coiling dragon pillar, Assistant Minister of Rights Wenfugu had an agitated expression on his face, his voice resounding. Whoever wants to pass this proposal will have to step over my dead body, Wenfugu said coldly. As a member of the Confucian faction in the court, Wenfugu had always loathed war. He would never agree to a matter of 10 million taels of gold. Wenfugu had been one of the most extreme opponents of the court's debates. Wenfugu, you bastard. Wenfugu's words almost caused the soldiers to explode with rage. Ha! No one noticed that beneath another coiling dragon pillar, King Chi, dressed in his official robe, was sneering. There was no need for him to appear in this court debate. Wenfugu alone was enough to keep them busy. Wenfugu, do you want to die? I'll grant you your wish. This is the alchemy iron coupon bestowed by the late emperor. Take it and commit suicide. Suddenly, a furious voice boomed through the hall like a clap of thunder. This voice came out of nowhere, and the extreme anger in it startled everyone. In an instant, the hall fell silent. Even Wenfugu shuddered and abruptly turned his head. Outside the hall, a figure strode in with a majestic gait. His eyes were so furious that they could spit fire, making one's heart tremble. The soldiers of the court are fighting a bloody battle at the border. It's because of the corpses of countless soldiers that all of you are able to talk freely here. Drought and floods, salaries, and all that nonsense about going all out to fight. Just what are you all talking about? Was the world of the Great Tang just empty talk? Did the northern frontier and the western regions just talk? Wenfugu, you are a pedantic scholar who harms the country and the people. Your death is a small matter, but it's a grave matter. Don't you want to die? Today, I'll fulfill your wish. King Song was unable to restrain his rage. His right hand swung down, and with a clang, he smashed a metal ticket into the ground in front of Wenfugu. Having served in the court for so long, this was the first time anyone had seen the King of Song so angry. His eyes were as cold as winter, and his gaze was as sharp as a sword, seemingly able to pierce through a person. There were so many people in the hall, but no one dared to meet his gaze. At this moment, even King Chi, who was hiding under the coiling dragon pillar, was startled, let alone the others. Song, King Chi was just about to step forward when the King of Song glared at him. The look was so fierce that it seemed like he wanted to take him down with him. Even someone as perverse as King Chi couldn't help but shiver. He stopped in his tracks, startled. What is this madman trying to do? It's just a few million taels of gold. It's not even his own. Why is he fighting so hard? For a moment, King Chi was frightened by the King of Song. It was just a few million taels of gold. The money spent was the court's. What did it have to do with him? King Chi was only objecting for the sake of objecting. He didn't really care about this matter. He didn't have that much determination in his heart, and he didn't have that much perseverance. It was not worth it to start a life and death struggle over such a matter, to the point where both sides would suffer losses. This bastard. Is it worth it for the sake of the youngest son of the Wang family? King Chi gritted his teeth, secretly hating. But when he saw the fierce look in the King of Song's eyes, he really couldn't make up his mind to fight to the death with him. Speak. Who else? The King of Song said furiously. This matter had been dragged on for nearly a month, and his patience was almost worn out. It was a once-in-a-lifetime matter that was beneficial to the country and the people, but it had been forcefully turned into the current situation, and all his anger had been aroused. Wenfugu, you sinner. You don't even know a thing about military tactics. If something happens at the border and there aren't enough warhorses, it will affect the military situation, causing the people at the border to be plunged into misery and suffering, and the common people to be slaughtered. This king will hold you accountable. Even if you die, this king will erect a tombstone. I will write your shame and harm the country on it and erect it in front of your grave. The king of Song was infuriated by these last words. Even though Wen Fugu was fearless in front of the court, he couldn't help but feel stifled upon hearing the king of Song's words, unable to speak. Scholars didn't fear death. What they cared about was reputation. Given the king of Song's reputation, he was clearly furious to say such words. Moreover, given his style, he was a man of his word. Wen Fugu had to admit that he truly didn't understand military affairs. If something really did go wrong and this stele was erected in front of his grave, it would be a fate even more difficult to accept than death. Wen Fugu stared at the king of Song, his lips parting several times, but no words came out. He had to admit that he had truly been frightened by the king of Song. Even Wen Fugu, his greatest opponent, had been intimidated by the king of Song, and King Qi had remained silent. For a moment, the imperial court was deathly still. The fierce debate instantly quieted down. The horse purchase case, which had been hotly debated for nearly a month, finally reached an agreement after a few hours. At nightfall, a messenger pigeon with black feathers and golden eyes took off from the capital. It flew across the capital, over mountains and rivers, all the way to the distant Wushang. Flap flap. Several days later, as the sun shone down, the pigeon flew through the window and landed in front of it. Ha, it's a success. Wang Chong put down the letter from the king of Song and glanced at the pigeon on the window, a faint smile on his lips. The funds for the purchase of horses had finally been approved. Although the king of Song had played down the matter in his letter, Wang Chong was well aware that with King Qi playing tricks in the imperial court, this matter would not be so easily approved. As for the faint hint of apology in the king of Song's letter, revealing that the initial amount was only 10 million taels of gold, Wang Chong didn't care too much about it. If there was a first, there would be a second. Crucially, the imperial court had opened the door to the purchase. Moreover, once the imperial court and the army saw the first batch of high-quality Turkic warhorses, they would naturally bring up the second and third batches. As these thoughts flitted through Wang Chong's mind, he heard a familiar voice. Congratulations to user for unlocking the mission, Warhorses of the Tang Dynasty. The reward is 400 points of destiny energy. Additionally, this mission has no time limit. The more warhorses user buys, the greater the reward. For every 10,000 warhorses, user will be rewarded with 100 points of destiny energy. User has already obtained 11,000 warhorses and is rewarded with an additional 110 points of destiny energy. There's a mission like this. Chapter 764. Could it be that the purchase of warhorses requires an extremely large number of them to be effective? The king of Song's 10 million taels of gold involves 100,000 warhorses, and that's why I started this mission. Wang Chong thought to himself, his mind in turmoil. But 510 points of destiny energy can make up for the loss I suffered when I violated the rules and wrote that letter to Gao Xianji. Boom boom boom. As he was thinking, a series of explosions came from outside the window. These explosions were so loud that the shockwaves of energy even rushed into Wang Chong's room. The carrier pigeon on the window lattice cooed in alarm and then took flight. Good. Waves of cheers could be heard from afar. It seemed that the spectators were cheering for him. However, even so, the series of explosions didn't stop. 24, 25, 26, 27, Wang Chong listened intently, at the same time silently counting down the duration of the explosions. In the City of Steel, he had heard this sort of explosion many times, countless times. However, today seemed to be a little different from usual. 41, 42, 43, 49. When Wang Chong counted down to 49 seconds, his calm face finally revealed a hint of surprise, a mixture of joy and astonishment. The explosions continued, and after 88 seconds, the sound of galloping horses finally came from outside the window. Through the window, a cavalryman from the City of Steel nimbly dismounted and rushed into Wang Chong's room. Reporting. Marquis, General Li has ordered that the 10 charges 10 victories formation has been completed. Marquis is invited to inspect it. The cavalryman knelt on the ground, his head lowered, his expression respectful. Okay. Wang Chong only said one word, and then with a wave of his sleeve, he strode past the cavalryman and left. Outside the door, he mounted the white-hoofed shadow, followed closely by a figure in light yellow. Huang Qian'er followed closely behind him on a horse with a silver sword strapped to her back. From the vicinity of the residence, deep within the city of steel, Wang Chong and Huang Qian'er rode over. The moment they got close, they saw that the ground was littered with wooden puppets, hundreds upon thousands of shattered wooden puppets scattered across the ground. What are you doing? Huang Qian'er urged her horse forward, and a strange expression appeared on her face as she gazed at the wooden puppets on the ground. Cavalry training. Wang Chong said indifferently, because we can't use real people, I specifically asked them to use wooden people instead. Using wooden dummies as targets for cavalry training was actually a European practice in the Middle Ages. In the other world, this was something many people knew. However, in this world, there was clearly no such practice. Most of the attacks were empty. In other words, it was a feint without any target. This method could not test the actual training effect. Furthermore, it was very easy for the cavalry to develop a childish mentality and completely ignore the fact that all of the cavalry training was ultimately for the sake of fighting and killing on the battlefield. If all of them had this mentality, they would suffer grievous casualties on the battlefield. This was also why Wang Chong had decided to use wooden dummies instead. Oh! A strange light flashed in Huang Qian'er's eyes as she gave a slight nod and said nothing else. The longer she followed Wang Chong, the more Huang Qian'er realized that Wang Chong was not only highly skilled and talented in martial arts, but his actions, especially his way of thinking, were also completely different from ordinary people. Whether it was this modular construction method or using wooden dummies to train cavalry, they were completely different from the information Huang Qian'er had received from her clan. No, it was not just the Huang clan. Wang Chong's way of doing things was completely different from all the great clans of the Tang dynasty. Let's begin. Wang Chong had no idea what Huang Qian'er was thinking. He extended a hand and gestured to a distant officer. The latter quickly gave the order, and soldiers quickly rushed out to help the wooden puppets that had been knocked down to their feet. As for the wooden puppets that had been broken, they were replaced. Wang Chong only glanced at them, then ignored them. Lightly urging his horse, he rode toward the main camp in the distance. Marquis. Upon seeing Wang Chong, Li Sai hurriedly urged his horse forward and bowed, then said, Wang Chong. As per Marquis's instructions, the 10 charges 10 victories formation has been completely mastered. Do you need to practice the 8 desolation army shattering formation now? Wang Chong had given him a total of 2 formation blueprints. The first was the 10 charges 10 victories formation, and the second was the more formidable and difficult 8 desolation army shattering formation. There's no need. Wang Chong waved his hand, rejecting Li Sai's suggestion. Mastering the 10 charges 10 victories formation is enough. There are more important matters to attend to. If he wanted to stabilize Qixi, he had to deal with Uzun, and to deal with Uzun, Dian Mengpoj and his 5,000 white braves were a threshold that Wang Chong could not cross. In the Battle of Zhangzheng, Wang Chong had killed Dian Pujiel and 27,000 Uzun cavalry, but almost all of them had been recruits. Compared to Dian Mengpoj's 5,000 well-trained white braves, they could not even be mentioned in the same breath. The fact that Dian Mengpoj dared to lead his 2,000 white braves into the Qixi Protectorate's main camp and even kill Pulan He and his 5,000 Qixi soldiers was proof enough of this. Fighting on a flat plateau, Dian Mengpoj's 5,000 white braves were more than enough to break through an army of 50,000. If one was not fully prepared, any underestimation of him would be suicidal. And the 10 charges 10 victories formation was what Wang Chong was planning to use to deal with Dian Mengpoj and his 5,000 white braves. In addition, all of you will be training in the city for the next few days. While you are training, use cloth to form a high wall. Do not allow anyone unrelated to get close. Before the actual operation begins, I do not want the slightest bit of information to leak out. Wang Chong sat on the white-hoofed shadow and sternly said. This general understands. Li Sai sternly said. Wang Chong nodded. The 10 charges 10 victories formation was of utmost importance. More importantly, he had to give Dian Mengpoj a pleasant surprise. If it was leaked ahead of time, the effect would be greatly reduced. Cree. Suddenly, a sharp cry came from the sky, attracting everyone's attention. Wang Chong raised his head and saw a familiar rock eagle swooping down from the sky. It's a bird raised by the eagle. This thought flitted through Wang Chong's mind. The eagle had not accompanied him to Wushang, instead staying in the capital to liaise with his subordinates. He was training more and more disciples, and Zhang Ke was only one of them. Unless there was something special, the eagle would not personally send him a message. Marquis, a letter from the capital. A few moments later, a warhorse galloped toward Wang Chong in a cloud of dust. The horseman on the horse held up a particularly eye-catching letter in his hand. Wang Chong took the letter and opened it. A familiar line of words immediately leapt into his eyes. Don't read these words. They will arrive in 5 days. The contents of the letter were simple, consisting of only 8 words, and it was signed by the name that Wang Chong had been anxiously waiting for. Wonderful. Wang Chong clenched his fists, his face brimming with excitement. Receiving this letter truly meant that everything was ready. The final flaw in his plan had been patched. Time slowly passed, and as more and more resources were delivered from the various provinces of the Tang dynasty to the City of Steel, the time Wang Chong was waiting for was getting more and more ripe. 10 days later. Move out. With this order, Wang Chong unsheathed his sword and pointed it forward. The gates of the City of Steel rumbled open, and the earth rumbled as Wang Chong led the 5,000 Wushang cavalry out. In a little more than half a month, Wang Chong's 5,000 Wushang cavalry were completely different from before. They were even stronger and more imposing. The energy exuded by the 5,000 Wushang cavalry was like a storm, distorting even space itself. Hiya! The earth rumbled and dust churned as the 5,000 Wushang cavalry galloped through the gates and vanished into the distance. On the distant Uzan plateau, eagles flew and grass grew. A gentle breeze blew past, and everything seemed to be bursting with life. On this boundless plateau, 2 well-trained Uzan cavalry stood side by side, making them extremely conspicuous. These Tang people are getting bolder and bolder. Longxi, Qixi, the southwest, the Tang dynasty's armies are everywhere. Last month, the Tang dynasty's armies even attacked the plateau. An Uzan cavalryman with a large hole in his left ear and a beast collar said, I've also heard of this matter. I've also heard of this matter. These Tang truly are too arrogant, but their arrogance won't last for long. The royal capital will soon send an army over. When the time comes, we'll first take Qixi, then Anxi and Longxi. Let's see what else they can use to resist us. The other Uzan cavalryman angrily said. Let them be smug for a while. We'll endure and complete the mission General has given us. The first Uzan cavalryman said. That's right. At present, only the few of us know that the army is about to move. General has sent us scouts to investigate for this very reason. Before the actual operation, General doesn't want the Tang people to notice anything. The second Uzan cavalryman nodded. Scouts were always the most elite, and they were also the most well-informed. They would always be the first to notice the slightest disturbance. But where are we going to patrol? The second Uzan cavalryman asked, and the two fell silent. The plateau stretched as far as the eye could see. Although the two had accepted a patrol mission, they had no idea where to patrol or what was worth patrolling. The plateau was different from other places. Even if someone invaded the plateau, they would only be able to stay for a short while before quickly retreating. Even those who had invaded Zhang Heng's recruit training camp had swiftly retreated after the battle. The two truly didn't understand what they could find on this patrol. We should be a little more cautious with the mission General has given us and not make any mistakes. That's right, last time in the northeast corner of the northern border, at the triangular gap, I seem to have seen a few sparrows trained by the Tang dynasty. These Tang people aren't simple. Let's go and take a look. Chapter 765. The war horses galloped across a distance of several hundred li. Soon, the two of them saw the edge of the plateau. Cree! A shrill cry came from the sky, and the two Tibetan horsemen raised their heads. In the distance, they could see 5 or 6 different kinds of birds flying in the sky, circling around as if they were searching for something. The two Uzun cavalrymen's expressions changed and their pupils shrank. They could tell at a glance that those birds were definitely the scouts of the Tang people. Screech! Screech! The sound of a bowstring being pulled was heard. Without any hesitation, the Uzun cavalryman with a beast ring on his left ear took out an arrow and aimed at the sky. But before the arrow was released, he saw a blur in front of him. An arm reached out and stopped him. It's useless. Those birds are flying very high. Our arrows can't reach them at all. Then what should we do? Do we do nothing? If they find something and ruin the general's plan, I'm afraid the general will punish us. Hee, I didn't say we do nothing. Those birds are being reared by someone. If the birds are here, the person must be not far away. We can't do anything to the birds in the sky, but we can do something to the Tang people on the ground, right? The second Uzun cavalryman said and sneered. Hearing this, the Uzun cavalryman with a beast ring on his left ear immediately came to his senses. Hiya! The two looked at each other and smiled. They suddenly pulled out their machetes and squeezed their horses' bellies. In the rolling dust, they galloped toward the direction where the birds were flying, full of murderous intent. I see them. In just a moment, on the edge of the plateau, the two saw a few figures. They were all about 17 or 18 years old. They were thin and weak, as if they could be blown away by the wind. They didn't look like they knew martial arts at all, nor did they look like elites of the Tang army. Let's go. Kill them. Stop. Ha, don't run. The two were invigorated. They waved their machetes and charged toward the young Tang people. However, the two of them had only rushed out a few dozen feet when a sudden change occurred. Rumble. Suddenly, a trembling sound came from beneath their feet. At the start, it was so soft that it couldn't be heard, but in the blink of an eye, the trembling grew stronger and stronger. In the end, it was like thunder, and the entire ground was shaking violently. Neigh! Before the two of them could react, they heard an impassioned neigh coming from the distant horizon. The earth trembled. Under their shocked gazes, tens of thousands of warhorses roared and rushed out from the horizon. And on those warhorses, there were fully armored, murderous soldiers of the Tang dynasty, who looked like demons from hell. Not good. The two of them turned pale with fright. Their courage to charge and kill had completely vanished in an instant. Run! The two of them were scared out of their wits. They turned their horses around and ran for their lives in the direction they came from. The two of them had never seen such a powerful Tang army. Tens of thousands of Tang dynasty cavalry did not say a word, but their cold eyes were like the deepest nightmare, making people's hearts palpitate. However, the most frightening thing was that this group of Tang dynasty cavalry was extremely fast. When the two of them realized it, the Tang dynasty cavalry at the front was only 700 or 800 feet away from them. For the cavalry who were good at high-speed charging, this distance was only a few breaths' time. Stop! A military order, loud and clear, resounded through the plateau. Right in front of the army, a general gave the order to stop. The 5,000 cavalry did not even look at the two Uzun scouts who were fleeing in the distance. They dismounted one by one. A group of people formed a defensive formation, while another group began to dig and tamp the ground. Clang! A thick steel plate more than 20 feet tall fell from the sky and stabbed into the ground, forming a tall wall on the plateau. This seemed to be some sort of signal. Next, the tens of thousands of Tang dynasty cavalry split up and worked together. Pulled by their warhorses, they transported the thick steel walls to the plateau. Some people supported the thick steel walls while others swung their hammers and hammered them, driving the steel walls deep into the earth. Everyone worked closely together and busied themselves, completely ignoring the Tuouzan cavalry in the distance. One side, two sides, three sides, four sides. In just a few short moments, hundreds of thick steel walls had been erected on the plateau. The Tuouzan cavalry had only traveled several hundred feet when a city of steel began to take shape on this desolate plateau. Bastards! What in the world are these Tang people doing? Although they were fleeing, the Tuouzan soldiers had been nervously paying attention to what was happening behind them. When they saw the Tang people bustling about, minding their own business and looking down on everyone else, the two were stunned. Don't worry about it so much. Let's go. Report this to the great general. The two were both shocked and furious. They squeezed their horses' bellies and sped off into the distance. Marquis, do we need to deal with those Tuouzan scouts? On the plateau, Li Sai rode on his Fergana horse, standing like an iron tower beside Wang Chong. He held a bow in one hand and 2 arrows in the other, aiming at the Tuouzan scouts who were running for their lives. There's no need. Wang Chong smiled, a carefree expression on his face. Leave one alive and kill the other. If they all die, no one will go back to report, and that won't be good. Understood. Li Sai smiled and put away one arrow. The second arrow shot out, instantly crossing more than 1,000 zhang. Squelch! The arrow pierced through the chest of the Uzan horseman with the beast earring on his left ear. The Uzan horseman fell from his highland steed without so much as a groan. The second Uzan horseman was so frightened that his soul seemed to leave his body. Stabbing his scimitar into his horse's rump, he fled even faster, quickly vanishing into the distance. Ready. Pick up the pace. The Uzan people should be here soon. Wang Chong ordered. Ignoring the fleeing Uzan horseman, he turned to the army behind him. 5,000 Wushang cavalry, more than 1,000 elites from the Southwestern War, and more than 1,000 clan experts from the City of Steel. For this operation, Wang Chong had brought with him nearly 7,500 soldiers. And this did not include the 5,000 craftsmen accompanying him. The scene that had taken place in the Southwestern War was now playing out once more on the Uzan Plateau. The strongest aspect of the Tang dynasty lay in the wealth it had accumulated over the decades of peace, as well as its formidable production and construction capabilities. It would be a great regret if this powerful ability could not be used in battle. Wang Chong was currently using the wealth and production capabilities of the Tang dynasty to intervene in the war. If he wanted to stabilize Qixi, he first had to pacify the Uzan. This time, Wang Chong not only wanted to forever block the Uzan's path south to invade Wushang, he also wanted to establish a base of his own on this isolated plateau. Moreover, with this base as the center, he could repel the Uzan and completely purge the forces of the plateau, thus stabilizing Qixi. Prepare the beehives. An energetic voice rang out amidst the densely packed and bustling army. Nay! Following the excited neighing of horses, huge steel boxes riddled with small holes were pulled up from the plateau by warhorses. Before the warhorses had even come to a stop, groups of fully armored soldiers had rushed forward, cut the ropes, and carefully carried the beehives forward. Careful! Don't carelessly move the boxes, and don't touch the switches on them. Put them down gently on the ground. On the side, a stern-faced officer was supervising the installation of the beehives. Only those who had truly seen them would understand just how powerful and frightening these steel boxes were. Everything went according to plan. All the beehives were installed in the front row, and the other steel walls were also erected on the plateau in an orderly manner. Everything seemed to have been rehearsed thousands of times in advance, and it was done quickly and efficiently. In the blink of an eye, a simple but strong fortress was erected at the edge of the plateau. And everything was still in the process of being perfected. Cree. Half an hour later, a high-pitched shriek came from the sky. The Uzun scout that Wang Chong had released was effective. This time, the Uzun's reaction was faster than any other time. In a short period of time, a vulture that was commonly seen on the Uzun plateau spread its wings and immediately appeared in everyone's field of vision. The first one was followed by the second, the third, the fourth. In just a few breaths' time, more than 10 vultures from the Uzun plateau flew over from afar. What a huge formation! Looks like our opponents this time are very different. Wang Chong looked at the sky and smiled. Nothing could be seen in the distance except for the vultures, but everyone could feel the tense atmosphere in the air. Without a doubt, the Uzuns had already discovered them. This was only the first wave of investigation. What awaited them next would be a huge battle. I heard that the Fomin Linta had a few battles with them before. It's normal for them to react quickly. Li Sai said. Unlike the others, his eyes showed no nervousness, but a deep anticipation. Before he had followed Wang Chong, he had been a soldier of the Biting Protectorate, a pure soldier. The duty of a soldier was to obey and to fight. In Li Sai's life, the two things that he was most passionate about were precious horses and fighting. Only the fiercest of battles could awaken the soul of battle in his heart. Zhang Ke, get ready. With Wang Chong's order, the members of the eagle team began to move. With sharp screeches, the rock eagles soared into the air, including the newly bred and valiant rock eagle on Zhang Ke's shoulder. Cree. Chapter 766. The other vultures, seeing that the situation was bad, quickly turned and fled in panic. When Zhang Ke and the others saw this, they let out another cry and quickly summoned back their rock eagles. Don't chase a cornered enemy, was a saying that applied not only to battles between two armies, but also to battles between eagles. Pass on my order. Prepare for battle. As Wang Chong gazed at the fleeing vultures, his smile slowly faded and his expression turned solemn. The tensome vultures were only the first wave of scouting. All they needed to do was drive them away. But that was not the most important thing. If the Uzun scouting vultures were here, that meant that their army wasn't far away. Screech! Before the first wave subsided, another wave rose. Not long after the vultures fled, another wave of sharp cries sounded, but this time, it was completely different from the previous cries. To the right of Wang Chong's army, from a completely different and unexpected direction, several of the eagles spread their wings and flew over. The eagle didn't fly close, stopping around 700 or 800 zhang away. They circled in the air, apparently scouting for something. Interesting. A hint of surprise flashed through Wang Chong's eyes as he looked up at the eagle circling in the air, but he quickly smiled. Marquis, do we need to exterminate those eagles? A young and immature voice came from the side. Zhang Ke looked up at the eagle circling in the air, his eyes bursting with fighting and killing intent. Marquis's grand plan could not be allowed to fail, nor could he allow anyone to recklessly scout the area. No matter who those people were, as long as they were flying in the sky, as long as Master Ho gave the order, he would definitely annihilate them. The mistake of the White Braves attacking the city once was enough. Zhang Ke would not allow himself to make a second mistake. There's no need. Wang Chong indifferently waved his hand, rejecting Zhang Ke's proposal. There are some eagles you can exterminate, but there are others you can't. Don't worry about the eagle, let them be. It won't affect us. Zhang Ke was still a youth, and it was normal for him to want to erase all eyes and ears in the sky. However, Wang Chong immediately recognized the golden hoop on the eagle's right claw. It was the symbol of the Qixi Protectorate. Obviously, the fortifications he built here not only attracted the attention of the Uzun, but also the Qixi Protectorate nearby. Since they both belonged to the military system, Wang Chong naturally couldn't get rid of the eagle who was on his side. Li Sai, you once served in Biting. Do you know of any other famous generals in the Qixi Protectorate besides Pu Linhe? Wang Chong asked. Just as he finished speaking, a deep and powerful voice came from behind him while he was deep in thought. I think there's Shilua Na, Heba Yi, and Kanandan. Shilua Na is stationed in the steppe between Qixi and the Western Turkic Khaganate, defending against the Western Turkic Khaganate soldiers. He's on the same level as Pu Linhe, perhaps even a little higher. In addition, Kanandan is with him in defense. If everything goes as expected, once Pu Linhe is dead, the one to replace him in the plateau and govern the Western Qixi Protectorate should be Heba Yi. Li Sai had served in Biting, and although he hadn't reached the rank of general, he had reached the rank of colonel, and one of the highest, on the verge of being promoted to commandant. As a pure soldier, Li Sai still had some understanding of some things in the military. Moreover, Biting and Qixi were very close, often needing to cooperate and communicate with each other. As a result, he also had some understanding of the Qixi Protectorate's military. Although he couldn't say that he knew it like the back of his hand, he had a basic understanding of the famous generals. Heba Yi, Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil, a look of recollection on his face. He had some understanding of this name. Compared to Pu Linhe, Heba Yi had been more proactive, and when he had been in power, he had launched more attacks against Uzun than Pu Linhe had. Alas, his flaw in this aspect was also rather obvious. Heba Yi would become abnormally conservative when his aggressive actions didn't achieve the results he wanted, or in more serious cases, he would fail. He would be even more conservative than any other naturally conservative general. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him a turtle hiding in its shell. In the early days, the Qixi Protectorate, which was close to Uzun, had been able to take the initiative to attack, but when Heba Yi took control, it began to pull back on all fronts, entering a situation where it could only passively take a beating. Wang Chong remembered that he had once flipped through Heba Yi's records, and when he was being tested by several seniors of the military, they had commented on him. Heba Yi, on the other hand, was an aggressive person. Even when he was at his most conservative, he was still actively looking for opportunities to attack. However, his aggressiveness was built on the fact that he had absolute confidence in everything he did and that he would definitely win. In other words, he was a conservative aggressor. How could he possibly find an opportunity that would guarantee victory? Thus, later on, Heba Yi went to the other extreme and became extremely conservative. He would not take any risks, not even the slightest bit. So it's him. Wang Chong shook his head, grinned, and then quickly threw the thought to the back of his mind. Get ready. Check all the beehives, ballistae, and warhorses again, Wang Chong urged his horse forward. In the sky, the eagle circled a few times before flying back in the direction it had come from. What? The people of Wushang are building fortifications on the plateau? A few moments later, in the camp of the Qixi Protectorate Army on the eastern line, a general with skin as rough as sand but an extremely determined expression stood up from his chair, a look of shock on his face. Yes, milord. They've prepared a large amount of steel and recruited at least 5,000 craftsmen, as well as 6,000 to 7,000 soldiers. They should have gathered more than 10,000 people. The scout kneeled on the ground and reported. Heba Yi's eyes went wide, speechless. This was too surprising. He had some understanding of Wushang's young marquis. He had just constructed a steel fortress in Wushang, so what was he doing on the plateau? Did he not know that this was the territory of the Qixi Protectorate? Just what did he want with more than 10,000 people? Milord, when we arrived, we discovered that the Uzun vultures were flying back. I reckon that the Uzun will quickly dispatch soldiers once they learn of their movements. Do we need to send reinforcements? The scout kneeled on the ground and said. Protecting Qixi, protecting all the people and merchants of the Tang dynasty who passed through this region, was a duty that every member of the Qixi Protectorate understood. Wushang's 10,000 some men and 5,000 some craftsmen could not stop the Uzun army. There's no need. He Yi immediately refused. An army was no trifling matter, and while Wushang's 10,000 men were important, the safety of the Qixi Protectorate was even more important. He could not risk the lives of tens of thousands of soldiers. But He Yi quickly began to hesitate. No, wait a moment. This is a serious matter. Hurry and inform the Protector General of this matter and have him make a decision. In addition, send more scouts and eagles to keep an eye on the situation. I need to know the slightest sign of trouble. The Lord of Wushang is the young Marquis of the Tang dynasty, a disciple of the Son of Heaven personally bestowed by the Holy Emperor. If something happens to him, none of us will be able to bear the consequences. Yes. The scout hurriedly left with the order. A few moments later, flap flap. A messenger bird flew into the air, flying toward the nearby Qixi Protectorate headquarters. This brat, what does he want to do now? In the Protectorate headquarters, Fomin Linta had been sipping tea, but when he received the news, he immediately stood up in shock. This was the most surprising news he had received since Wang Cheng's arrival in Wushang. Fomin Linta had never imagined that the first thing Wang Cheng would do after establishing himself in Wushang was run to the Uzun Plateau. Lord Protector General, this is truly unreasonable. Just what does this youngest son of the Wang clan want to do in Wushang? Does he want to deal with the Uzun? But with just his 10,000 some men and 5,000 some craftsmen who don't know martial arts, isn't this a joke? A doubtful voice came from Shusha. It wasn't just Fomin Linta who was confused by this matter. At the same time, the Qixi generals protecting him were also confused. But if he's not here to deal with the Uzun, why would he run to the plateau? How could he not understand the risks involved? Another Qixi general said. For a moment, the hall fell silent. Wang Cheng had participated in the War of the Southwest and rendered an enormous service. No one would believe that he had not brought so many men to the plateau to deal with the Uzun. But no one would believe that he had come to deal with the Uzun. The plateau was bitterly cold, the altitude high, and the air thin. Even Fomin Linta and the other who needed to withdraw their armies from time to time, and they had to constantly switch out the garrison, let alone the Han. Moreover, if the Uzun could not win, they would flee. This was their territory, and they knew every blade of grass and tree like the back of their hand. Who could be more familiar with this place than they were? If the Uzun chose to avoid battle, then whatever Wang Cheng wanted to do would become meaningless. Moreover, the plateau had always been a suitable place for the Uzun to charge. Wang Cheng's 10,000 some men would probably be eaten until nothing was left of them. So the question was, why had Wang Cheng mobilized such a large force? Had he really gone senile? For a moment, even though the people in the hall were all experienced generals who had been through many wars and had seen many things, they were all confused. Hey, I was just thinking about how to deal with that brat. I didn't think that he would run off to deal with the Uzun. He brought this upon himself. Even if the imperial court investigates, we can wash our hands clean of responsibility. In the end, it was Fomin Linta who broke the silence. He narrowed his eyes, a cold light shining in them. Pass on my order. Tell He Yi to stay put. Without my order, he is forbidden from providing any reinforcements. In addition, if that brat from the Wang clan dies in battle, immediately inform me. Although we won't help him, we still have to get his corpse back. That way, those old imperial censors of the court won't make trouble for me again. Yes. With that, the messenger left in a hurry, looking travel-worn. Chapter 767. Meanwhile, on the Uzun Plateau, Wang Cheng was leading the Uzun cavalry and the experts dispatched by the great clans, preparing for battle. Nay! The excited cry of a horse came from the distance, instantly shattering the calm of the plateau. The Uzun reacted much faster than expected. In the blink of an eye, the earth quaked as thousands of Uzun cavalry galloped toward the plateau like a black tide. Their aura seemed capable of toppling mountains and overturning seas, making one's heart palpitate in fear. In a flash, the winds began to howl, and the atmosphere on the steppe became tense. Ready. Wang Chong raised his sword and pointed it forward, his voice calm and composed. In the face of the thousands of Uzun cavalry, Wang Chong showed no fear, only endless anticipation. If he wanted to change Qixi, change the western regions, change the fate of the entire empire, he would have to start now. Clang! Armor clattered, and the moment Wang Chong gave the order, the 5,000 Wushang cavalry behind Wang Chong finished assembling. The 5,000 soldiers silently stood behind Wang Chong, all of them as silent as mountains. Invading like fire, immovable like a mountain. Although the army did not move, everyone could feel the majestic energy hidden under that calmness, like a volcano. 10 li, 8 li, 6 li. As they got closer and closer, they could even see the breaths exhaled by the Uzun cavalry and the trembling weapons in their hands. It's the mountain army. A cry of alarm could be heard, not from Wang Chong's camp, but from the scouts dispatched by the Qixi Protectorate several hundred zhang away. They had fought with the Uzun for many years and were extremely familiar with the Uzun armies. At a glance, they had noticed the symbol of a mountain on the left chests of the Uzun soldiers. Based on the terrain, the Uzun had divided their armies into the Plains Army, the Steppe Army, and the Mountain Army. The most powerful among them was the Mountain Army. Cavalry was most suited to fighting on flat terrain. If they could fight on complicated mountainous terrain, then the strength of this army could be imagined. The strength of the Mountain Army generally surpassed that of other armies. They were extremely strong, and the warhorses they rode on were specially trained. Not only were their bones stronger than other highland steeds, they could run faster, and their muscles were sturdier, allowing them to withstand more intense chases and collisions. Most importantly, all of the mountain army had penetrated deep into the hinterlands of other countries. Each of them was used to fighting and had rich combat experience. Everyone in Qixi knew of one thing: Uzun's mountain army had once bypassed Qixi and penetrated deep into the steppe, defeating a force of Western Turkic Khaganate cavalry several times their number. The Qixi Protectorate was stationed at the border, where the situation was complicated, and wars were ongoing all year round. Compared to the inland army, the Qixi Protectorate was definitely one of the best. When encountering Tibetan soldiers, they were often able to wait for movement, defend for attack, and rely on their strength and training to force back their foes. But when they ran into the mountain army, the Qixi Protectorate would often suffer 8 to 10 casualties. In other words, if 8 Uzun soldiers died in battle, at least 10 Qixi Protectorate soldiers would be buried with them. Of the many armies of the Uzun Plateau, the mountain army was undoubtedly the army that the Qixi Protectorate feared the most. Whether it was Pulan He or Hebayi, if they ran into this army, they would definitely order their entire army to fortify their defenses and be on full alert. If necessary, they would even withdraw from the plateau and temporarily avoid the brunt of the attack. It's over. They ran into the mountain army. They're dead for sure. The scouts of the Qixi Protectorate army had nervous and worried expressions. Although they were different from Wang Chong and the others, they were still the Tang people. When Wang Chong and the others were killed, they felt the same way. There's nothing we can do. The general has given the order to forbid us from mobilizing. It's impossible for them to fight against Uzun's mountain army with just their numbers. If they leave the plateau now, they might still be able to make it. A Qixi scout with a centipede-like scar on his neck said. It's too late. Once they retreat, the Uzun will take advantage of the situation and charge down. The power of the cavalry is even greater than the charge on the plains. If that happens, they will die even faster. Now, no matter what, they are doomed. No one can save them. The other Qixi scout said. Those who could serve as scouts were the elites of the army, all of them extremely experienced. The moment they saw the mountain army appear, they could already see the fate of Wang Chong and the others. In the distance, the dense sea of Uzun mountain army did not continue their charge. Instead, they stopped around 2,000 zhang away, all the warhorses neighing as they stared at the triangular gap in the northeast corner. These Tang barbarians are truly stubborn. One base is enough, but they still dare to expand here. Do they think that the plateau belongs to them? At the very front of the army was a burly and furry Uzun general with a dark face. He wielded a strange stinger more than 1 zhang long, a savage light in his eyes. General, the triangular gap is the main path between Qixi, Longxi, and the Turkic steppe. No matter what, we can't let them block it. An Uzun general next to him said. Although the triangular gap in the northeast corner of the Uzun's northern border was not very large, it was one of the quickest paths for the Uzun to enter and exit the plateau. This was also why the Uzun cavalry had arrived so quickly upon discovering that Wang Chong and the others were wantonly constructing there. Pass on my order. All soldiers, charge and kill them. Buluhu, the dark-faced Uzun general, fiercely ordered. Yes, General. The messenger quickly left, but he had barely gone a distance when he was called back. Wait a moment. Buluhu hesitated for a moment as he gazed at the distant, gleaming steel walls that resembled fish scales. As a famous general of the northern Uzun, Buluhu was far more cautious than the other generals. Those fish scale-like steel walls instinctively made him feel suspicious. Don't be in such a rush. Send a group of cavalry to probe them. If there's no problem, kill them. Buluhu sternly said. Yes, General. Very quickly, the bleak and sonorous blare of the yak horn resounded through the dense ranks of the Tibetan army. The army stirred, and soon, a vanguard of around 2,000 soldiers was sent out. Marquis, they've sent out the vanguard. Li Sai said. Wang Chong smiled and nodded. The generals this time seemed to be different. They seemed to be very cautious. The majority of the Uzun were straightforward and valiant. It was extremely rare for the Uzun to send out a vanguard to scout ahead. Get ready. Wang Chong waved his sword and gave the order. 300 Wushang cavalry suddenly charged out from behind the heavy steel walls, heading straight for the Uzun mountain soldiers. Bastard! Buluhu and the other Uzun generals' pupils constricted at this sight, their eyes spitting fire. The Uzun mountain soldiers had killed countless opponents, but this was the first time they had encountered such an arrogant enemy. Kill them all. Leave no one alive. Buluhu said coldly. In the distance, the 2,000 Uzun mountain soldiers moved faster and faster. 800 feet, 700 feet, 600 feet. Kill. Suddenly, there was an earth-shattering roar. The 2,000 Uzun mountain soldiers unsheathed their scimitars with bloodshot eyes and charged at the 300 Wushang cavalry. As they charged, the 2,000 Uzun mountain soldiers quickly split into 7 groups of 300, forming a 7-layered echelon formation. Like a tidal wave, they charged at the 300 Wushang cavalry. The earth trembled as the aura of the 2,000 Uzun cavalry merged into one. It was incomparably heavy. Rumbling sounds came from beneath the hooves of the horses, as if even the earth beneath their feet could not bear their weight. In stark contrast to the Uzun, the 300 Wushang cavalry were deathly silent, not making a single sound. Their formation constantly lengthened, finally forming a long arrow formation that charged at the 2,000 Uzun mountain soldiers. Although it was silent, there was an indescribable shock to it. 400 feet, 300 feet, 200 feet, as the distance between them grew shorter, the atmosphere became more and more tense. Everyone's gazes were focused on the 300 Wushang cavalry and the 2,000 Uzun mountain soldiers. Damn it, what are they doing? They're courting death. Are they crazy? Those 300 cavalry will all die. Not a single one will survive. In the distance, the scouts from the Qixi Protectorate paled. Not even the most elite of Qixi's forces would dare to face the mountain soldiers in such a manner, using 300 cavalry to fight against an enemy 6 or 7 times their number. No one had expected Wang Chong to use this sort of strategy. While they were still in shock, the 300 Wushang cavalry were getting closer and closer. Clang! Without the slightest hesitation, the 300 Wushang cavalry unsheathed their swords and charged forward. 400 feet, 300 feet, 200 feet, the earth rumbled as the distance grew shorter and shorter. The 300 Wushang cavalry remained silent, a cloud of dust rising 10 zhang into the air behind them. At this moment, the tension had reached its peak. Bang! There was an earth-shattering boom as the two armies collided in the center of the battlefield. Ni! Hundreds of warhorses neighed fiercely in the wind, their voices drowning out all other sounds on the plateau. Boom boom boom. After what seemed like an instant, but also like countless long centuries, the sound of horses falling to the ground resounded throughout the battlefield. Screams, the neighing of warhorses, and the clashing of swords mixed into a cacophony of screams. A moment later, under the stunned gazes of countless people, the 300 Wushang cavalry and the Uzun army were locked in a stalemate for only a few moments before they cut through the Uzun army's defenses like a sharp blade. Kill! Only now did the 300 Wushang cavalry let out a heaven-shaking roar. 300 halos vibrated beneath their feet, forming a line that sent the Uzun cavalry flying. 1 tier, 2 tiers, 3 tiers, the echelon formation of the Uzun army was like paper in front of the 300 Wushang cavalry, torn apart like paper. Ah! Screams filled the air. The cavalry's charge was so powerful that the Uzun cavalry in front of them were either smashed to pieces along with their horses, or sent flying 10 zhang away by the combined force of the charge of the 300 Wushang cavalry. It was a shocking scene. Chapter 768. This is impossible. In the distance, Buluhu's eyes went wide, his face filled with disbelief and shock, his entire body trembling. This can't be happening. His body leaned forward, his hands and feet icy cold. The scouts of the Qixi Protectorate were also shocked. 300 against 2,000, a difference of 7 times. No one had expected the final victor to be 300. Impossible. Impossible. Just who are they? These people were the elites of the Qixi Protectorate and had participated in many battles, but they had never encountered such formidable cavalry. Not only were they outnumbered, they were also able to crush them like rotten twigs. In just a few seconds, countless corpses had appeared on the plateau. Horse corpses, human corpses, weapons, and all sorts of severed limbs were strewn across the grass in a radius of several hundred zhang. It was a gruesome scene. No matter what the others thought, the outcome of this battle of 300 against 2,000 had already been decided. The Uzun formation had been completely cleaved apart, with more than 600 Uzun cavalry killed in the first round. The remaining 1,400 were in utter chaos. Without a formation and fighting on their own, the Uzun were simply no match for the Wushang cavalry under Wang Chong. In just a few moments, they had suffered grievous casualties. 800, 1,200, 1,400, in just a few seconds, the Uzun army had been routed, the ground covered in corpses. Retreat! In the distance, Buluhu could no longer hold back and gave the order to retreat. With this order, all the remaining Uzun cavalry began to retreat in fear. Have them retreat as well. Wang Chong looked into the distance and faintly smiled. It was better not to pursue a cornered enemy. It was enough for these Tibetans to see the strength of their side. The 300 Wushang cavalrymen quickly gathered and returned in formation. The entire process was orderly and silent, just like when they left, leaving a speechless shock. At this moment, not to mention the scouts of the Qixi Protectorate, even Buluhu and the Uzun army in the distance were speechless. The atmosphere was deathly silent, and it revealed an indescribably oppressive feeling. How are the casualties? Wang Chong asked. 1 heavily injured, 2 lightly injured. Everything else is fine. Li Sai asked from the side. Sure. Wang Chong smiled. This level of damage was completely within the acceptable range. Having successfully cultivated the Wushang halo, the current Wushang cavalry was completely different from before. Coupled with their own strength, it was more than enough to deal with the Uzun cavalry in front of them. After all, the Wushang cavalry was known as the strongest cavalry in the apocalypse. The entire plateau fell into a strange silence. Wang Chong did not attack again, and in the distance, Buluhu and the Uzun mountain army also maintained their calm. Many pairs of eyes stared in the direction of Wang Chong's group, but they did not rashly attack. Marquis, they seem to have become more cautious. I'm afraid they won't attack for the time being. Li Sai suddenly looked to the front and said. The 300 cavalrymen had indeed defeated the enemy, but it had also caused Buluhu to become even more cautious, not daring to attack carelessly. Their main goal in entering the plateau was to deal with the Uzun people and completely uproot their forces here. If they did not come out, then this operation would have lost its meaning. Relax. It's fine if they attack, but it's even better if they don't attack. Wang Chong grinned confidently. He had made thorough plans for this operation, and he had spent a long time preparing for it. No matter how the Uzun side reacted, it was not important to Wang Chong. Pass on my order. Begin the second phase of the plan. Wang Chong suddenly turned his head and said to someone behind him. Ha ha, ha ha. The sound of horns came from the rear of the army, from the plateau. A few moments later, craftsmen began to walk up the plateau, carrying cables on their backs. Heavy steel modules were tied to the back of the cable. 10, 20, 100, 500. In a short time, hundreds, if not thousands, of craftsmen had been transferred from the City of Steel, dragging a large number of steel modules, walked up the plateau and appeared in the rear of the army. "Milord, what are they doing?" The activity on Wang Chong's side quickly attracted the attention of the Uzun people. As the Uzun officers watched from their horses, they suddenly felt uneasy. This army of the Tang people was truly too strange. It was completely different from any army they had ever encountered. Moreover, those steel walls thrust into the plateau made them feel extremely uneasy. "Don't be in such a rush. Let's first investigate their background before moving," Buluhu said. Buluhu and the others could not clearly see the steel walls. Buluhu and the others weren't able to see the steel walls clearly. All they could see was that there were a lot of people moving about inside. "Look! Milord, there's smoke," an Uzun officer suddenly said. Following his gaze, they could clearly see thick smoke rising from behind the steel walls of the Tang people's army. Just what are these Tang barbarians doing? Buluhu's brow was tightly furrowed, an indescribable strangeness in his heart. He had led his army into battle, but he had never encountered such a situation. He could not see through the enemy's strategic intentions. While he was puzzled, the smoke grew thicker and thicker. It did not increase slowly, but multiplied exponentially. "That's furnace fire." A thought flashed through Buluhu's mind. His entire body trembled, and he suddenly realized that the strange black smoke was actually smoke coming from burning furnaces. Whoosh! At this moment, all the Uzun soldiers saw the distant Tang people's army spit out blazing flames. Just what are these bastards trying to do? At this point, Buluhu was becoming more and more confused. Furnace fire, steel, and 6,000 to 7,000 soldiers, not a single person had ever confused him so much. In truth, it was not just Buluhu. All the officers of the Uzun mountain army were confused. However, this confusion did not last for long. Soon, they understood the purpose of the furnace fire. "General, look!" An exclamation echoed. Looking past the thick steel plates that were dozens of feet tall and blocked their vision like fish scales, everyone could clearly see a steel wall that was slowly rising and growing higher and higher. It was shining with silver light. Yes. It was a steel wall. Different from the small steel walls that were built with steel plates, this one was a part of a real, complete city. "General, not good. These Tang people want to build a city on the plateau. They want to build a base here." At this moment, they finally understood the intentions of the Tang people's army. Unlike any other army in the past, they didn't want to take a stroll around this place and then leave. Instead, they wanted to build a fortress of steel here, defend it, and take root here forever. In a flash, all the Uzun soldiers were alarmed and furious. In the past, the Uzun Plateau had always been believed to be a blessed land, bestowed by the heavens to the Uzun people, a place that no other country could touch. Garrisoning troops here for a short period of time was one thing, but building a sturdy fortress of steel here and defending it for a long time, or even occupying it, was another matter altogether. Moreover, these Tang people were blocking one of the most important routes the Uzun people used to enter and exit the plateau. And what was most intolerable was that even though they clearly knew that the Uzun army was on the other side, they still ignored it and built a fortress on the plateau. Impudent. Even someone as composed as Buluhu couldn't help but blush in anger. He clenched his teeth and roared, "These Tang people are too arrogant. These Tang have no regard for anyone else, their arrogance boundless. Pass on my order. All soldiers, get ready to kill all these Tang, leaving not a single one alive." Wang Chong roared. "I want to let them know what it means to overestimate one's capabilities. General, not good. Wait a moment, I remember now. That youth seems to be Wu Shang." Suddenly, one of the cavalry officers next to Buluhu cried out. His eyes had been focused on Wang Chong this entire time, but now, he seemed to wake up from a dream, a look of extreme fear and agitation on his face. But before he could finish speaking, Buluhu interrupted him, his eyes red. "What Wu Shang? Say no more. No matter who he is, anyone who dares to build a fortress on the plateau is doomed. All troops, hear my order. Attack!" Boom! Boom! The shrill blare of a bugle horn resounded over the plateau. 20,000 zhang away, the Tibetan army that had stopped began to move restlessly once more, horses neighing and metal clanging as a murderous aura exploded out of them, aimed at Wang Chong's group. Not good. They're about to attack. Hurry and report this to General. Several of the Chishi scouts paled and immediately retreated, putting some distance between them and the battlefield. As for the other two cavalry, they immediately began to gallop toward the main camp of the Chishi Protectorate Army on the western line. In this battle, the fate of one side had already been decided. They needed to report this as quickly as possible. Putting aside the reactions of the Chishi Protectorate scouts, Wang Chong and Li Sai showed no signs of unease as they watched the Uzun army slowly grow restless and prepare to attack. On the contrary, they showed a hint of joy. "Marquis, our method is working." Chapter 769. Wang Chong nodded slightly and smiled. This Uzun general is very cautious. However, no matter how cautious he is, he won't be able to withstand us building fortifications on the plateau and building a city on the spot. Furthermore, we're building a triangular gap in such an important place. If he can still endure it, then we'll speed up the construction of the city. In addition, we'll build a second city at the same time. There's a limit to a person's patience. I don't believe that these impulsive Uzun can endure it for so long. The Uzun was not an agricultural civilization like the Central Plains. Their culture made it impossible for them to be as tenacious and tolerant as the Han people. Their nature was more inclined to act on instinct, which was why the Uzun were famous for their ferocity and bravery. In other words, they were impulsive. No matter how cautious and wise the Uzun were, they were only compared to the impulsive Uzun. Like Daluan Ruozan, who was well versed in the classics of the Central Plains, calm and wise, the Uzun could be counted on one hand in the entire Uzun Empire. And no matter what, it was impossible for a top-notch Uzun general of that level to appear in the army before them. Let them get ready. Wang Chong looked forward and raised an arm. Yes, Marquis. Li Sai bowed and quickly turned his horse around to go back. Swift as the wind, gentle as the forest, unmoving as the mountain, and aggressive as the fire. The 5,000 Wushang cavalry behind Wang Chong had reached the peak of military training. Every move they made was orderly, and their tacit understanding with each other was something that no other army could match up to. There was no earth-shattering commotion like the Uzun cavalry. The moment the order was given, the entire army had already assembled, forming a stark contrast with the Uzun army. However, this kind of silence, coupled with the momentum of 300 people sweeping away 2,000 people, and that kind of overwhelming killing, gave people the feeling of the calm before the storm. This was a powerful pressure that no noise could match. Buzz! Uzun's attack was much faster than expected. In just a few breaths, the earth trembled and the wild grass on the plateau swayed along with the wind. Amidst the rustling sound of the wild grass, thousands upon thousands of war horses galloped forward, slowly increasing their speed as they charged towards the crowd. Kill! In an instant, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Tens of thousands of Uzun people shouted together. At that moment, it was earth-shattering, and the entire sky seemed to collapse. Charge together, river formation. Charge in through the gaps in the steel walls. If these Tang barbarians think that they can stop us by building some fortifications on the plateau and erecting a few steel walls, then they are gravely mistaken. Buluhu said viciously. The mountain army was different from other cavalry that were only proficient in charging on plains, grasslands, and plateaus. No matter how complicated the terrain was, the mountain army would still be able to charge and break through enemy lines. If anyone thought that a few steel walls would be enough to deal with them, they would be too naive and underestimating them. Rumble. The earth rumbled, and the dense grass on the plateau began to tremble more and more violently. 1,800 feet, 1,700 feet, 1,600 feet, 1,500 feet. As the distance closed, the tens of thousands of Uzun warhorses grew faster and faster. Behind them, billowing dust rose dozens of feet into the air, making the Uzun charge even more frightening. Not only that, but during the charge, the Uzun army rapidly split into thousands of smaller formations, each one aimed at the gaps in the steel walls in front of Wang Chong. Not only did the army not slow down in the slightest, but it even sped up. Interesting. This Uzun general seems to be quite extraordinary. Across from the army, Wang Chong closed his eyes slightly when he saw this. Many steel walls were erected all over the plateau, and one of the most important functions was to break up the tide-like echelon formation that the Uzun people were famous for. But this Uzun general before him, despite having an absolute advantage in numbers, not only did he maintain extreme caution, but he was also able to divide the army into another powerful charging formation without using the echelon formation. This alone made him surpass most of the Uzun generals. But unfortunately, even so, it's useless. Because you don't understand what you're facing at all. Wang Chong's eyes flickered for a moment, but soon returned to normal. The Uzun general was already very outstanding, but unfortunately, he didn't understand that he wasn't facing an ordinary army of the Tang people, but the #1 war saint recognized by the Central Plains. The tricks he showed were useless in the eyes of Wang Chong. The steel walls that Wang Chong set up were not as simple as he thought. Suke, have all the craftsmen retreat to the rear. There's no need to stop the construction of the city. Continue the construction. I have a feeling that we'll need these city walls soon. Wang Chong looked ahead and said without turning his head. Yes, Marquis. Suke bowed in acknowledgement and quickly retreated. The 3,000 craftsmen he brought earlier quickly retreated to the rear and joined in the construction of the vast city in the rear. 1,400 zhang, 1,300 zhang, 1,200 zhang, 1,100 zhang, the vast Uzun cavalry covered the sky and the earth, whistling as they approached. They moved faster and faster, and the distance between them grew shorter and shorter. When the distance was shortened to 1,000 zhang, rumble. A halo shot out from under Wang Chong's feet and quickly spread to the entire army. Clang! A long sword slashed through the air. In an instant, a fierce gale stirred and metal clattered. The 5,000 Wushang cavalry shot out of the formation like an arrow from a bow amidst the neighing of Nei's horses. This army of 5,000 exploded with an earth-shattering aura that not even an army of tens of thousands could match. The halo of Wushang, the halo of sharpness, the halo of Dusk Stallion, all of these halos were attached to the feet of the Wushang cavalry. At the very front of the army, Li Sai's 2-meter-tall body was like a mountain. Beneath his feet, a massive halo of thorns shot out and rapidly spread to the feet of every soldier. When the 5,000 Wushang cavalry had first stepped out, their feet had been dim and devoid of halos. But in a flash, the number of top-class halos beneath their feet had increased to 4 or 5. Together with the halos of the other commanders, each Wushang cavalry now had 7 or 8 individual halos. Qing Sanyuan, Su Shixian, Su Kei, each of these people had cultivated a different war halo, and all of these halos were attached to the army. This caused the seemingly weak Wushang cavalry to rapidly rise in strength, ultimately reaching an astonishing level. How could this be? Sensing the terrifying aura rising from the bodies of the Tang dynasty cavalry, all the Uzan mountain soldiers felt an extreme blow. It was as if an insignificant and weak ant had suddenly expanded into a mountain-moving giant in front of him. And the numerous top-notch halos beneath the feet of this great Tang cavalryman left everyone deeply shaken. In a flash, all of them felt an enormous pressure. Even the commander-in-chief, Buluhu, couldn't help but widen his eyes. He had fought in many places, the western regions, Arabia, Greater and Lesser Balor, the Tocharians, the Tang dynasty. He had encountered countless armies, but none of them had given him such a feeling of power. Buluhu wanted to make some changes and warn the army, but it was too late. The arrow was already knocked on the bowstring, and it had to be released. Moreover, it was no longer up to him to decide. Once the cavalry began to move, it would be impossible to stop for a short time. The final result would be trampling over each other. Where did this army come from? This thought flashed through Buluhu's mind, but before he could think any further, the two armies had already clashed. Rumble. With a heaven-shaking boom, the 5,000 Wushang cavalry charged into the Uzan army like a thunderclap. Clang! Amidst the clattering of metal, no one noticed that in the distance, Wang Chong was looking at the fierce battle in front of him with a grin, and then he had simultaneously released the Bane of the Battlefield Halo and the Bane of Generals Halo. These two halos were not applied to his own people, but to the feet of all the Tibetan cavalry and officers. In a flash, amidst cries of alarm and warning, the strength of the Uzan mountain army plummeted by several levels. Neigh! The wretched neighs of warhorses resounded over the plateau. A moment later, under countless stunned gazes, the clearly superior Uzan mountain army, numbering at least 30 to 40,000, was routed like weeds in the face of the charge of the 5,000 Wushang cavalry. The 5,000 Wushang cavalry roared as if they were invincible. The densely packed Uzan soldiers were no match for them. Countless Uzan soldiers and their horses were thrown into the air and sent flying. Stop them, stop them. Those who retreat will die. Attack them from the flanks. Echelon formation, organize the defense. No one can defeat the Uzan on the plateau. Attack! Waves of wretched screams rang out. All the Uzan generals were issuing urgent orders, but no order could stop the Uzan army from collapsing. The entire army was routed. And the speed of the collapse was unbelievable. Oh my God! What did I just see? Report to the general. Report to the general. This is crazy. How could our Tang dynasty have such a powerful army? This is the plateau. And their opponents are the elite Uzan mountain army. The general will never believe what we just saw. As the eagle soared into the sky, the distant scouts of the Qixi Protectorate were stunned by this sight. After fighting with the Uzan for so many years, this was the first time they had realized that the cavalry of the Tang dynasty could also be so formidable, capable of such a powerful charge. On the plateau, they were actually able to crush the Uzan, who were hailed as the proud sons of the plateau. Chapter 771. 5,000, 7,000, 9,000. In the distance, the casualties of the Uzun mountain army had reached an inconceivable level, and this number was still climbing. When the 5,000 Uzun cavalry charged together in the arrow formation, their efficiency was far greater than the 300 from before. But even so, the battle was far from over. Ready! A loud voice resounded through the heavens and earth. In front of the steel walls that were scattered all over the place like fish scales, a Chenbin raised the sword in his hand high up in the air. Cavalry would not stop in their high-speed charge. Although the Wushang army led by Li Sai had pierced through the enemy formation and split the army in two, the two halves had already reached the steel walls. Now, after Wang Cheng's 5,000 Wushang cavalry had left, only the 1,500 some elites from the southwest and the experts from the great clans were left behind. 60 zhang, 50 zhang, 40 zhang, 30 zhang, the distance was getting shorter and shorter. If they did not stop the charging Uzun cavalry, the craftsmen who had been transferred from the 8,000 some steel walls to help with the construction of the walls would all be trampled to death under the hooves of the Uzun horses. 25 zhang, 24 zhang, 23 zhang. When they were about 200 feet away, Chen Bin, who was at the forefront of the team, finally gave the final order. Release. Buzz. With a loud boom, tens of thousands of sharp arrows suddenly burst out from the steel city wall at the very front like a torrential rain, covering the sky and covering the earth. Aya! Screams filled the air as countless Tibetans and their horses were pierced through by the arrows. They fell to the ground, their numbers grievous. The beehives were heavy weapons that Wang Cheng had set up in the steel walls, and he had also set them up on the plateau. Against cavalry, they were extremely lethal. Release. Chen Bin swung his sword again, and another volley of arrows shot out. Another few thousand Uzun cavalrymen fell in front of these steel walls. The operation of the beehives was very simple. The 1,500 cavalrymen led by Chen Bin could control more than 3,000 beehives. In each beehive, there were at least 40 to 50 arrows. A volley of 150,000 arrows. This was something that only Wang Cheng could do. Even though the Uzun iron cavalry was fully armed and wore thick armor, they still suffered heavy casualties when faced with this kind of attacks that had no blind spots and were as dense as a locust rain. Be careful. Dodge the rain of arrows. Shouts in the Uzun language resounded throughout the battlefield. Such a terrifying attack caused all the Uzun commanders to tremble. No one had expected that after losing the 5,000 Tang dynasty cavalry, the remaining soldiers would still have such a frightening fighting force. In just a single clash, 7,000 to 8,000 cavalry had fallen in front of the silver-white steel walls. The horse corpses and human corpses had already formed another obstacle for the Tang people. Just what's going on here? They're definitely not from the Qixi Protectorate. How could they have such a powerful Tang army? Everyone was deeply shaken by this sight, but even more than that, they felt fear. The 5,000 inconceivably powerful cavalry and the terrifying rain of arrows had already surpassed their imaginations. The entire army was in chaos. Roar! At this moment, everyone suddenly heard a heaven-shaking roar. This roar was like a thunderclap, splitting the sky and shaking the plateau. Just as the entire battlefield descended into chaos, the commander of the 5,000 Wushang cavalry, Li Sai, finally made his move. A powerful sword aura shot up into the sky like a storm, cleaving down at the densest concentration of Uzun soldiers. Ah! With a blood-curdling scream, the sword aura swept across the ground, leaving a pitch-black, 20-foot-long crack in the vast plateau. At the same time, it also cleaved Buluhu, the commander of the Uzun mountain troops. Buluhu's eyes were wide open as his body, which had been cleaved in two, fell heavily to the ground. Although he was a famous general in the northern Uzun region, Buluhu was still no match for Li Sai, the future, invincible general, of the Tang dynasty. In the face of Li Sai's all-out attack, he had still died under his sword. With Buluhu dead, the remaining Uzun army was like a group of dragons without a leader, and they were even more disorganized. Run! The first to flee were Buluhu's bodyguards. Faced with the 5,000 terrifying Wushang cavalry and the mountains of corpses around them, even Buluhu's most elite bodyguards felt fear and cowardice. No matter what the origins of this Tang dynasty cavalry were, they were definitely not something they could fight against. Their escape was like a signal. In that instant, all the Uzun mountain troops collapsed, all their confidence vanishing. In the face of this unprecedentedly powerful army, this Uzun mountain troops that had conquered many countries, all of their fierceness and bravery turned to nothing in the face of this even more powerful army. Run! Quickly report this to the generals. All the Uzun cavalry fled in all directions like birds and beasts. An army that had lost all will to fight would only die faster in the face of the 5,000 Wushang cavalry. Slash, 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 the sound of blades slicing through flesh resounded through the battlefield. The 5,000 Wushang cavalry chased after them, and more Uzun mountain troops fell to the ground. An hour later, when the battle ended, the entire plateau was covered in mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The Uzun army had left behind more than 20,000 corpses. There's no need to chase. Li Sai swung his long sword horizontally and drew an arc on the grass to stop the group from chasing after him. Don't chase a cornered enemy. Marquis's intention is to defeat them. Next, treat the wounded and prepare for the next battle. Yes, my lord. The sound of a gong rang out, and all the Wushang cavalry gathered and rushed back. All the wounded were also gathered and carried to the rear for treatment. The intense battle had ended in less than 2 hours. And the result of the battle was that the side that had the advantage in numbers became the complete loser. This is impossible. How could Wushang have such a powerful army? A cry of alarm could be heard, not from the scouts of the Qixi Protectorate, but from the commander of the Qixi Protectorate, He Yi. The moment he had heard the news, he had personally led his soldiers to this place, but he had never imagined that he would see this sort of scene. General, should we go over? A deputy general next to him asked. There's no need. Let's first report to Lord Protector General and wait for his orders. He Yi thought for a few moments. There was no one in Qixi who didn't know of the relationship between the Protector General and the second son of the Wang clan, Wushang. Until the Protector General gave the order, He Yi did not dare to rashly make a decision. Moreover, the Qixi Protectorate had no intention of sending troops to Wang Chong and Uzun's men. Thus, in this investigation, both He Yi and his deputy generals had been wearing the armor of ordinary soldiers. If not for the fact that they were from the Qixi Protectorate, they wouldn't have known, so meeting Wang Chong or not didn't matter. Let's go. He Yi immediately turned his horse around and rode off. Marquis, look! The Qixi Protectorate's men. Zhang Ke suddenly pointed into the distance. The group followed Zhang Ke's finger and saw He Yi and the others turn their horses around and leave. Chasing lightning, soaring pagoda, and bronze Jew, what fine horses! When did the scouts of the Qixi Protectorate get to ride such fine horses? Cheng Sanyuan suddenly said with a smile. If they're putting on an act, they have to go all the way. It seems like He Ye's men are still lacking. Wang Chong also smiled as he looked into the distance. Although he couldn't see the faces of these people, based on the quality of their warhorses, Wang Chong could more or less guess who they were. According to the rules of the Tang dynasty, in order to ride such fine horses in the army, one had to be a general at the very least. In the Qixi Protectorate, the only people of this rank who would appear at a time like this were probably He Ye's men. Marquis, these fellows are really leaving us in the lurch. They're clearly right in front of us, but they're still unwilling to send troops. As their commander, He Yi even disguised himself and came here. Should we go and meet them? Su Shixian said, his voice tinged with indignation. The Uzun were the Tang dynasty's greatest foe, and they existed in Longxi, the southwest, and Qixi. By sending troops to sweep away the Uzun, Wang Chong was actually helping the Qixi Protectorate. But the Qixi Protectorate clearly had the ability to do so, yet it chose not to send troops. The thought of this made one feel cold. Forget it. There's no need to lower ourselves to their level. After all, they're just acting according to Fomin Linta's wishes. Without Fomin Linta's order, he wouldn't dare to send troops. Wang Chong waved his hand and faintly smiled. This war had always been part of his plan, and he had never considered the Qixi Protectorate from the start. Whether the Qixi Protectorate participated or not was not important to Wang Chong. Get ready and speed up the construction of the city. In the upcoming war, this city will quickly come in handy. In addition, I have a feeling that Dian Mangpoj should have received the news by now. At the end, an enigmatic smile appeared in Wang Chong's eyes. In this expedition to the plateau, Wang Chong's greatest target was still Dian Mangpoj. To shoot a man, first shoot his horse, and to capture his followers, first capture their leader. The greatest threat to all of Qixi was Dian Mangpoj. If he hadn't attacked the Qixi Protectorate like a madman, disregarding all costs, the Qixi Protectorate would not have been forced into such a state. In this aspect, Dian Mangpoj was far more of a threat than Dusong Mangpoj, a great general of the Uzun Empire. This was also why Wang Chong had placed him at the top of his priority list. Good luck. Marquis has ordered that anyone who can build the third level in 4 hours will be rewarded 50 taels of silver. The rear of the army was buzzing with activity, the more than 8,000 craftsmen dispatched from the City of Steel working as one, using every second to build the walls. One furnace after another was opened, sending waves of heat soaring into the sky. Chapter 772. By the time Wang Chong had finished his battle and was putting all his efforts into building a defensive fortress, Heba Ye's news had already reached the Qixi Protectorate headquarters. What? Impossible. Heba Ye, are you sure? The Uzun Mountain Army really has 20 to 30,000 soldiers. In the main hall of the Protectorate headquarters, Fomin Linta stood up from his throne, a look of disbelief on his face as he saw Heba Ye personally rush back from his camp. Lord Protector General, your subordinate personally checked. There is absolutely no mistake. Heba Ye said, kneeling on the ground. His head was bowed very low. This was a major matter, and he had originally wanted to send a scout, but when he thought about how much importance the Protector General placed on this second son of the Wang clan, he had decided to personally come. Moreover, this matter was far too shocking. Nothing like this had ever happened in Qixi or on the plateau. Heba Ye didn't dare to make a decision on his own, nor did he dare to leave behind any loopholes. Thus, he had personally gone to the Qixi Protectorate headquarters to explain to Fomin Linta. Impossible. Without the permission of the imperial court, privately raising an army is a crime punishable by death. And how could he possibly have such a powerful army? Fomin Linta's face was filled with shock. Although there had been rumors that a Tang army had taken a mysterious path into the Uzun Plateau and wiped out more than 20,000 recruits of Zhangsheng recruit training camp, and that this Tang army was very likely to be Wushang's Wang Chong, Fomin Linta didn't believe it. There were only a few paths between the Uzun and the Tang dynasty, and each path was guarded by an army. It was even more impossible for a mysterious path to exist. This sort of story was inherently unreliable. Moreover, all the information had come from Uzun, so it was up to them to decide whether it was true or not. No one could verify it. Without concrete evidence, Fomin Linta would never believe such nonsense. But this time was different. This battle had taken place on the Uzun Plateau, and Heba Ye had personally verified it, so he had no choice but to believe it. Let's go. I want to see it for myself. A glimmer of light flashed in Fomin Linta's eyes. Without saying a word, he abruptly walked down from the main hall and disappeared outside. Fomin Linta of the Qixi Protectorate was far from the only one shocked by the battle on the plateau. What? Buluhu's mountain army was completely annihilated. Bastard! Does the Chishi Protectorate have the ability to do so? In the depths of the Uzan Highland, over 1,000 miles away from the battlefield of the Triangular Gap, Dayan Mengpoj was enraged when he heard the news. General, it's not the Chishi Protectorate. It's a great Tang army of unknown origin. Although they don't have many people, they are more than twice as strong as the Chishi Protectorate. Not only that, even General Boluhu was killed by them. General, this is absolutely true. We did not lie. The surviving officers of the Chishi Protectorate were kneeling on the ground, their bodies trembling like mice before a cat. Although Great General Dusong Mengpoj held the highest status in the camp, the one they feared the most was Dayan Mengpoj. This was because everyone knew that the true leader of the camp was none other than this Azura of the Empire. And in terms of methods, everyone knew that Lord Dayan Mengpoj was far fiercer and more domineering than Dusong Mengpoj. Bastard, you still dare to quibble? The largest army in Chishi is the Chishi Protectorate. If it wasn't them, could it have been Anshi's Gao Xianji? Dayan Mengpoj's eyes exploded with killing intent. 20 to 30,000 cavalry had died in battle, and this was no small number. In Dayan Mangban's life, what he could not tolerate the most were defeated generals, and what he could not tolerate even more were those incompetent people who had clearly been defeated but still dared to quibble about it. The steppe revered courage, and no one could tolerate cowardice and incompetence. Milord, it wasn't the Anshi army, but Wushang's men, a relatively small and thin Uzan general argued in fear. But the moment he said, Wushang, buzz, the mood in the tent suddenly changed. Dayan Mengpoj had been brimming with killing intent, but these two words seemed to provoke him. His body trembled and he raised his head, his eyes fixed on that thin general. Sensing the change in Dayan Mengpoj's body, all the generals of the mountain army felt their hearts clench, their eyes closing in fear. No one knew what had happened, nor why Dayan Mengpoj had reacted so strongly, but at this moment, everyone subconsciously turned to that thin general. Milord, I've heard a few things about Wushang from my brothers in the other armies. At the triangular gap in the northeast corner, those Tang people used steel to build a city right in front of us, and they did so with incredible speed. This style is exactly the same as the one I've heard about in Wushang's city of steel. Before we went out to battle, I tried to warn General Boluhu, but alas, General was too eager for battle and simply didn't listen to me. The skinny general knelt on the ground and said. His hands were tightly clenched as he remained motionless on the ground. Buzz. Without any warning, as soon as he finished his last sentence, the entire tent suddenly became deathly silent. Dayan Mengpoj, who had been like a furious lion, his gaze seemingly capable of killing, suddenly fell silent. This drastic change caused the mountain army generals in the tent to feel uneasy. Several of them stole glances at each other, but no one dared to speak. No one knew what had happened. Tell me, what does the enemy's commander look like? An icy voice suddenly rang out in everyone's ears. There was no emotion in this voice. They raised their heads and realized that at some point, Dayan Mengpoj had stood up from his seat. His expression was calm, but even the slowest person could sense that this was not true calmness. On the contrary, this calm Dayan Mengpoj was even more frightening than when he had been furious. Milord, the commander of the Tang people is a burly man who is more than 8 feet tall. He rides a Fergana horse and wields a long sword that is taller than a man. He looks extremely frightening, but the true commander isn't him. Instead, it's a 17 or 18-year-old youth behind him. We've seen that all the Tang people follow his lead, including that burly man who rides the Fergana horse, the generals of the Uzan Mountain Army said. Kachak. The crisp sound of fists being clenched resounded through the tent, interrupting the mountain army general's words. Alarmed, they raised their heads and realized that Dayan Mengpoj's calm face had unwittingly turned ashen, and his cold eyes had become frighteningly gloomy. Everyone's hearts began to pound, and they hurriedly shut their mouths. Bastard! No one knew that Dayan Mengpoj's heart was burning with rage. When the mountain army generals mentioned Wushang and then mentioned a 17-year-old youth, there were some things that no longer needed to be said. Wang Chong. At this moment, Dian Mengpoj knew exactly what he was up against, and he also knew who the mountain army had lost to. Dian Mengpoj could never have imagined that the youth of the Tang people in the City of Steel would already lead his army to attack the plateau not long after their last clash, before he could attack the City of Steel again. Pass on my order. Mobilize the entire army. Northeast corner, triangular gap. Set out immediately. Dian Mengpoj's bone-chilling voice resounded through the hall, a voice suffused with frenzied murderous intent. Yes. No one in the tent dared to say anything else. All of them hurriedly lowered their heads and acknowledged. Oh. A few moments later, with the bleak and vigorous blare of the yak horn, the vast Tibetan plateau was suddenly buffeted by fierce winds. Tens of thousands of black tents surged out of the tens of thousands of soldiers. Neigh. The neighing of warhorses resounded over the plateau, and the atmosphere was extremely somber. Rumble. A few moments later, the earth began to rumble as the vast army of Uzun cavalry surged out like a black tide. Accompanying this horseman was a special group of cavalry, their horses adorned with special white inscriptions. These were none other than Dian Mengpoj's famous white braves. When he heard the names of Wushang and Wang Chong, Dian Mengpoj's killing intent had truly been aroused. Whether it was for the 27,000 recruits of Zhangzhung training camp, for Wang Chong's slain Dian Pujial, for the Buluhu army that had just been destroyed, and even further, for the soldiers of the Ngari royal lineage that had been killed in the War of the Southwest, Dian Mengpoj had ample reason to kill Wang Chong and completely eliminate the threat of the Uzun. Rumble. Roiling clouds of dust soared into the sky as the army swiftly made its way to the northeast corner of the northern Uzun plateau. At the same time, as the army was about to depart, a messenger rushed into an even larger tent in the rear of the army. Great General, it's bad. General Dian has given the order to mobilize the army and leave the camp. They're already heading toward the camp of the Qixi Protectorate. The messenger kneeled on the ground, his forehead beaded with sweat. Everyone in Uzun knew that the highest-ranking commander was Great General Dusong Mengpoj, and only he had the authority to mobilize the army. But Dian Mengpoj had actually mobilized the army without the Great General's permission or token. According to Tibetan law, this was a major crime. Okay, I already know. In the black tent, Dusong Mengpoj was seated on a simple Tibetan chair, a teacup in his hand. The lid of the teacup touched as he lightly dabbed at the froth. This was the air tea that Uzun had brought over from the southwest on the Tea Horse Road. The people of Uzun mainly ate meat, which was too oily, so they bought the tea bricks of the Tang dynasty and Mengshi Zhao. Imperial great generals like Dusong Mengpoj enjoyed the finest air tea. Chapter 773. What's the situation with Fomin Linta? Dusong Mengpoj asked as he put down his teacup. Milord, our people disguised themselves as merchants and have been scouting the area around the Qixi Protectorate. In addition, we asked the Arabs to help keep watch. We just received word that Fomin Linta has already left the Qixi Protectorate and is heading to the front lines of the plateau. The messenger knelt on the ground and said. In addition, what about Gao Xianji? Dusong Mengpoj said. In the entire northern border of the plateau, the Uzun Empire only cared about two people, Fomin Linta and Gao Xianji. The two emperors of the Tang dynasty were not too far from each other, and they could support each other in certain situations. Gao Xianji is currently preparing for war. Based on our spies in Anxi, he's probably preparing to attack the kingdoms to the west of the Tsong Mountains, so he should have no time to worry about Qixi. In addition, Gao Xianji and Fomin Linta have never had a good relationship. It's always been Qixi that goes to reinforce Anxi, while Anxi's people rarely return to reinforce Qixi. The chances of this happening are extremely low. The messenger knelt on the ground and said sincerely. Then let's move out. There's no need to worry about General Dian. I'll help him keep an eye on Fomin Linta. As long as there's no threat from Foman Linta, General Dian should be fine. Dusong Mengpoj faintly smiled. With these last words, he pushed his teacup aside and left the tent. The army rumbled and soon moved toward the northern front lines amidst the billowing dust. Hurry! Hurry and pour the molten iron. It's misaligned. Move the second module to the left a little more. Put in more effort. The second floor is about to be finished. Equipment team, hurry and prepare the beehives. At the same time, in the northern region of the Uzan Plateau, in the northeast corner of the triangular gap, 8,000 to 9,000 craftsmen were busy working like bees. In just a few hours, a small city of steel, flickering with true silver light, was slowly taking shape at the edge of the plateau. This was a miniature city much smaller than Wushang's city of steel, only 1/20th the size of the actual city of steel. Although it was much smaller, for Wangchong, as a military city, it was more than enough to accommodate around 50,000 soldiers. Wangchong had only come up with this number after careful consideration. Moreover, this city was built on the triangular gap in the northeast corner of Uzan, blocking the way for the Uzan people to enter and leave the plateau. However, the Tang dynasty could continuously enter the city through the triangular gap to support the city defense and resist the Uzan. If everything went as expected, this would be the Tang dynasty's first strategic military stronghold on the Uzan plateau. Wangchong's modular city once more displayed its enormous might on the plateau. In just a little more than 2 hours, the city had been slowly built from scratch. Although it was not completely finished, 2 floors had already been built. Since each floor was 3 meters tall, the 2 floors were 6 meters tall, and it already possessed a preliminary defensive capability. The 3rd floor was still in the midst of construction, and it would soon be completed. Once the 3rd floor was completed, the 9-meter-tall, miniature city of steel would take root on the plateau and possess a considerable degree of defensive capability. Cree! As he was constructing the steel walls, he heard shrill cries coming from the distance. Wang Chong followed the sound from the walls and saw that in the distance, birds were spreading their wings and flying in his direction. This time, it was not just vultures. There were also many rock eagles, sea eagles, large eagles, sparrowhawks. A dense mass of 50 to 60 birds was flying over. Milord. On the side, the rock eagle perched on Zhang Kei's shoulder tensed up at the sight of this horde of birds and turned to look at Wang Chong. There were far too many birds this time. The eagle team alone would find it very difficult to deal with them. There's no need to worry about them. Let them come. Wang Chong faintly smiled and waved his hand. In addition, Li Sai, get ready. Our master is coming. Yes, this general obeys. Li Sai cupped his fists and bowed. His armor clattered as he descended the wall. All soldiers, hear my order. Assemble and prepare to meet the enemy. Li Sai's sonorous voice resounded over the plateau. On the Nei, Li Sai mounted his Fergana horse and galloped to the front. Behind him, the 5,000 Wushang cavalry quickly assembled in a tight formation. In the rear, the 8,000 craftsmen seemed to sense something, and they looked a little uneasy. Only Wang Chong's expression was the same as ever. Dian Mengpoj, it's about time for you to arrive. Wang Chong held his hands behind his back and faintly smiled. Before the soldiers and horses moved, the scouts moved first. A normal Tibetan army would be lucky to have 10 some scouting beasts. There were more than 50 to 60 birds in this flock. There was no doubt that an unprecedentedly large army was coming towards them from behind this group of scouting birds. Wang Chong's judgment was correct. A few moments later, a powerful gust of wind suddenly surged over from the horizon. This gust of wind carried large amounts of grass and dust that filled the battlefield. Although there was nothing in the distance, everyone could feel the tense atmosphere, and an invisible pressure came surging over like a tide. Neigh! In just a few breaths' time, the neighing of warhorses could be heard. At first, it was so soft that it could not be heard, but in the blink of an eye, it sounded like thunder, resounding through the entire world. Dong! Dong! Following the loud beating of war drums, before the warhorses could appear, a huge black war flag quickly leaped into everyone's sight from the horizon. This war flag was 6 to 7 people tall, black with red edges. On the flag was a huge, burning white flame, like an evil flower from hell, giving off a strong aura of death. And under this huge war flag, everyone saw a disdainful, domineering figure that was filled with a strong desire to kill and kill. That person was riding a divine steed that was taller than a person. The divine steed was as white as snow, but its 4 hooves were as red as blood. That person and the steed only glanced at them from afar, and in that instant, everyone felt a chill from the depths of their hearts. Dian Mangpoj. On top of the city wall, Wang Chong glanced at them from afar, and a flash of light flashed through his mind. To be able to exude such a powerful aura from such a distance, in Wang Chong's memory, there was only one Dian Mangpoj. And that snow-white divine steed with 4 blood-red hooves from the Great Snow Mountain was the best proof of that. Rumble. Just as this thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind, there was a sudden change on the horizon. In the midst of the loud noise, all the horses were silent. Countless Uzun warhorses swarmed out from his left and right, like a raging wave. Get ready. Li Sai's voice sounded from the front of the formation. His mountainous body stood in front of the army like a mainstay, giving off an incomparably powerful feeling. Clang! His symbolic sword, taller than a man, rose into the air, gleaming with a cold light under the gloomy sky. The mood in the northeastern region of the Uzun Plateau instantly became somber and somber. Rumble. As the warhorses approached, the atmosphere grew tense and tense. "Milord, it's Dian Mangpoj. The Uzun really has appeared." In another place far away from Wang Chong, He Yi had a nervous look on his face. On the night of Pulan He's death, he had been in the camp and had even exchanged blows with him. He Yi still had a deep impression of that demonic Tibetan brigadier general, who was like a demon, a nightmare. He had recognized Dian Mangpoj at a glance. "No. It's not just Dian Mangpoj, there's also Dusong Mangpoj." An indifferent voice came from the side. Foman Linta was riding a black steed, looking into the distance with a profound look in his eyes. Great generals were abnormally sensitive to powerful existences of the same level. Although he couldn't see anything, Foman Linta could already sense Dusong Mangpoj's existence. Even with the obstruction and concealment of an army, Dusong Mangpoj was as conspicuous as a lighthouse in the darkness to Foman Linta. Ah! He Yi paled as he looked at Foman Linta and couldn't help but gasp. One Dian Mangpoj was already very difficult to deal with, and now there was another Dusong Mangpoj. All the soldiers of the Uzun Empire on the northern border had probably been mobilized. "Milord, should we move out now?" He Yi asked. "That bastard. It seems like he already predicted this." Foman Linta clenched his fists as he glanced at the triangular gap where Wang Chong was, his eyes almost spitting fire. He was now almost certain that the boy from the Wang clan had also schemed against him. According to the rules of the imperial court, if Wang Chong had moved on his own and encountered an enemy like Buluhu on the plateau, his death would have been in vain. Foman Linta would be able to cleanly deny any responsibility, and he might even be able to mock the Wang clan. But the triangular gap occupied by Wang Chong was very close to the Qixi Protectorate's main camp. If the Uzun Great General and Brigadier Generals were so close, and if the Qixi Protectorate still did nothing, then it would be truly incompetent. Whether or not Wang Chong died, Foman Linta would have to face the questioning of the imperial court. Normally, Foman Linta wouldn't have cared that much, but not long ago, Dian Mangpoj and his white braves had broken through the Qixi Protectorate's defense line and charged all the way to Wang Chong's City of Steel. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.